And we are live. Okay, we're live. Welcome to... Okay, no, I shouldn't do the intro yet. We should do this. Join us in person or online for Canada's only occult conference. Visit Vancouver in beautiful British Columbia and help us leave lockdowns behind us and get back to life. The first of 4 D and Kelly conferences over the next 4 years support the Arcane Research Society in bringing excellence in academic scholarship and practical knowledge from some of the best scholars and occultists in the field. Featuring in 2024 this summer, Dr. Terry Burns, translator of Dr. John Dee's famous Monas Hieroglyphica. Dr. Burns has just completed a 52-video course on this mystical text, which you can watch on YouTube for free. Join us and experts Rufus Opus, P.D. Newman, J. Allen Moore, Daniel Rekshan, Frater RC, and more for this exciting event which will explore the angelic and spirit-filled world of Elizabethan mages, Dr. John Dee and the alchemist Sir Edward Kelly. Learn the secrets of drawing spirits into crystals, conjuration, and Enochian angel magic, as well as the role of dreams and their connections to these other extra-dimensional realities and alchemical transformation. Sign up today to attend online or in person at enochiacon.com, presented by the Arcane Research Society. All right, and thanks for tuning in today, everybody. I'm here to announce one of the new added presenters to EnochiaCon, Bartimaeus Black. Bartimaeus, welcome to Magic Without Fears. Oh, you're muted. Let's unmute you.
There we go. All right. Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so that was the old video. It doesn't have you and Ike Baker added to it, but the new video will be out either tonight or tomorrow with you guys. Well, the new video has a whole segment on each presenter, so that's really exciting. And it'll be
sweet. That's a pretty nice video.
It's a long video. It's like 8 minutes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So people are here.
Very nice.
I'm so curious about you because you're what when I was your age, people described as a young scholar, and that always infuriated me because, 27, you've been an adult for a while at that stage, and yeah, I'm curious about you. I've got lots of questions and look forward to digging into your story. Maybe we could start with something I find actually to be one of the most interesting things that you've intimated about yourself, which is a interesting incident of doing magic for a reason that kind of worked but backfired. And it has something to do with your current path in life and conversion from an old path. Is that a good place to start, in your opinion?
Might as well. I think it's a great way to illustrate the awkward ways that one of the awkward ways that the Holy Guardian Angel can work in your life in circumstances that may not have appeared as such at the time, is the way that I would put that. Yeah, all right. So I guess I'll get on about that. Basically, many years ago, well, not many, it was like 5 years ago, but it was something I gotten started with when I was a younger teenager. Soon after I got interested in magic was this whole project of converting to Orthodox Judaism. I had converted about 5 years ago or so, and I had wanted to become a proper scholar and to be able to have a bit of a congregation there, that sort of thing, because I have that sort of drive to teach and serve as a guide for people, who are getting started on the spiritual path. It's intimated a lot in my astrological chart too, so can't remember the exact planetary aspects that speak to that particular concern, but I had at the time. I had used the I believe it's the first Pentacle of Sol in the Mather's Greater Key of Solomon that's oriented towards fame and all these sorts of concerns, fame and fortune, renown, all that stuff. I was like, oh, this is just the sort of thing that I should use because that'll help me get to where I want to be. And basically for years, I just kind of been ignored there for the most part, like as a convert, I was like the token convert where people are like, oh, look, it's that weird guy who joined up. Like, we'll talk to him a little bit, but beyond that, there wasn't any real possibility for anything there for me to act in that role as a spiritual guide or teacher or anything like that. Which isn't why I left, just for the record. That was a whole other thing of theological concerns that I ran into after years of studying that. But so I'd use this Pentacle of Saul specifically for the purpose of getting to be well known and liked by people and all that stuff. And so my wife and I left that particular community about a year ago. We moved back home to Washington State from Williamsburg and Brooklyn, and things were very calm for a good period of time. I just cut everybody off. I didn't want to talk to anybody there. It's just it was a very toxic sort of situation. So soon after, when was it? It was just around Christmas time, funnily enough, that I had a stalker apparently who'd been tracing me for months and then found me through my grandfather's obituary. Found my mom's page, and she put pictures from Thanksgiving where we had the whole family over at our place over here in Bellingham. And this guy like found my page and was like, "Oh, look, he's like a sorcerer. He's been doing all this stuff and whatever." He's like trying to totally ruin the reputation I had, which was pretty good for the most part. you know um as far as I managed to get there was borderline miraculous. But then the whole thing completely blew up everywhere. Like there, like in English Jewish media, people were talking about me and my story, and I was just like, why in the hell are these people talking about me? I had nothing to do with them. I was totally in the Yiddish speaking Jewish world. And there's
Really?
not really much interaction between the two. Yeah,
So did you grow up Jewish?
no, not at all. Grew up Protestant.
No.
No, I just
Interesting.
converted. That was the thing. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
No,
So you grew up, what
yeah,
kind of Protestant did you grow up?
non-denominational standard American sort of, go to church on Sunday, but not really any great theological development. Which, if I'd have known more, I would have stuck with it. I would have stuck with Christianity instead of converting to Judaism. But then
As
that
we used
ended
to
up
say,
bringing me around full circle, and yeah.
yeah, interesting. You went from Protestant Christian to to a Jewish convert to well, I don't know what you describe it, but something somewhat is it would you use the term Orthodox, or what sort of where are you at now?
Ecclesiastical Gnostic. I
There we
have a lot
go.
of
I knew there's
Catholic
I knew you
influence in
probably had a
terms
good
of
term
my
for it.
personal approach. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
that's
it's what I
very
picked
interesting.
up
So what,
from others in those circles. So
as we used to say in seminary, so what kind of when it comes to what kind of Protestant were you, since you're saying a generic American kind, within that category, were you arms up or arms down?
mostly arms down. There were some arms up
Okay,
people in our church,
arms
but
down.
yeah.
Yeah,
My mom actually
it's
did
like,
go to a Pentecostal type church for a while too, but that was after after I was grown up and not living with her anymore. But that was interesting. I went a couple times with her, and I was like, "Whoa!" After I'd been involved with the Gnostics here for a bit, there was my whole spiritual journey in regards to the Judaism thing is very long and convoluted. But now I'm in a settled place. At least I got threw myself entirely into it. Got fluent in Hebrew and Aramaic, so I could really study everything in depth. I studied the Talmud, the Zohar, Mishnah, a bunch of the Midrashim, also the homiletic texts, right? The Midrash. And I ultimately just came to the conclusion that there's not really the basis that Judaism wants to secure for itself in terms of its comparison to Christianity is really truly so much older in terms of all of its concepts. A lot of what drew me to Judaism was Kabbalah, this idea of this ancient mystical tradition that's way older than Gnosticism and all this stuff. And most of the concepts come from Neoplatonism. If you really trace it through the historical stuff, it's a lot of the metaphors are also utilized by Origen, and it just from the books themselves. To me, it became very clear that there was more borrowing. I mean, of course, there's cross pollination, right? But there was more borrowing on the Jewish side from the Greeks than vice versa. After doing all the study and reading academic stuff too, it was like, okay, well,
yeah,
might as well return to my roots, the sort of
yeah,
Western roots there.
Yeah, you really did sort of, you did the re-return, you came full circle, but to it ended up in a different place than you started, right?
Oh
Philosophers love to
yeah,
talk about
yeah, for sure.
kind of a journey. That's so interesting. Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
agree with me
so
that people should
oh, sure.
no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying with that story, but I was trying to bring it to its conclusion there with the solar talisman kind of backfire fail story. There, it's like I was like, nobody knows who I am. Like, okay, maybe it didn't work, and then it comes out. There's a video on YouTube with an interview where I'm on an English language Jewish interviewing station with this guy who's like a major radio broadcaster in New York, talking about this stuff and refuting all these crazy accusations people made about me, like that I took $500,000 from the community and all sorts of crazy stuff. And like, if you could tell by the drywall behind me, I I didn't get $500,000 from anybody, but it was pretty nuts.
Actually,
And it totally blew up.
Okay.
And
but that is the celebrity trick, right? Whitewall.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's the yeah. It was interesting. But so yeah, this great fame thing that ended up backfiring in a really weird way. But I think my holy guardian angel is protecting me in a lot of ways. There's yeah, I think my holy guardian angel is protecting me for sure, and guiding me on the right path in the long run.
So when did your interest in Kabbalah and angels begin?
Well, so that started right around the time I got familiar with the ideas of ceremonial magic, which was when I was about 13. Yeah, 12, 13, somewhere around that range. Um, it's There's a little bit of it where, people kind of look down on some of these new pagan occult books, that kind of look at them as goofy and stuff. But it was Oberon Zell Ravenheart's Grimoire for the Apprentice Wizard that ended up being my first exposure to any of that stuff. He has this whole thing where he has it all divided up into these separate sections, and he talks about ceremonial magic there. And like Golden Dawn style Kabbalah, that sort of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I got totally obsessed with it. And so I spent my time reading different grimoires. This was back when sacred texts had a lot of really good stuff on it. I think they still exist, if I'm not mistaken. They have all the Mather stuff on there, and I found Book of Abramelin on a PDF, and I found different grimoires, even just at the library, in Seattle. I managed to find different grimoires and stuff but they're all like the Mathers editions back then.
Well, those are good editions.
I think I did an interlibrary loan for the. Oh yeah. I think I did an interlibrary loan for the Goetia of Dr. Rudd too, and the Peterson Lemegeton, which was pretty interesting to read, considering it's basically a facsimile of the original English, where before we had standardized spelling rules, which was great fun.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that one actually.
Yeah, that's my first got started with that. Really?
No.
Oh yeah, it's very fun.
I mean, all these sort of books came along long after my time of learning these things. So the core texts that we had in my day were just very different. It's one of the things I like about the world of today is there's all these new texts to explore, and it's not so bad necessarily to check out of a scene for a while and sharpen your saw in different ways, and then come back and get to have all these surprises and like all this great stuff to catch up on. Because like if you're an avid student, like I'm sure you are as well, if you're staying up to date on things, it can actually become quite a long drip process waiting for the next thing. But you go F off to rural Ireland and play music for a few years, you come back and you're like, oh, there's been some real work done and some real headway made and some advancements. But now I have a few years of work to actually dig into without constantly waiting for new scholarship to open up. So I haven't looked at, and also Goetia and 18th century, 19th century Goetia is not really an interest to me. So that's just a personal thing. Yeah. I'm not what you can call an app. I mean, it didn't really even open up for me in an interesting way until JSK's True Grimoire, Jake Stratton Kent's True Grimoire. After reading that cover to cover over just a very short few days, I couldn't put it down. I was like, Okay, now I sort of see a personal interest in this, though that's not to say that it's necessarily for me. Um, I'm all about depth when it comes to what grimoires or systems you work with rather than breadth.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That sounds pretty similar to my own approach. I'm not such a big Goetia guy either. It's not really my cup of tea. Um, my One of the things I'd also been interested in from back then was Enochian magic, and I think the only thing that had really been put out then, outside of Lon Milo Duquette's work, was Athena Wallander's what was it, the Complete Enochian Grimoire or something. It was like right before Aaron
Yeah,
Leach
I
put
got it
out
right
his
here.
book. Yeah, I
She
finally was able to get the
she lives
paperback of that when she put that out in like 2015. That
she
was fun.
literally just lives a
It's a
few
good to
blocks
read.
away from me right here.
Oh, that's great. Nice.
Yeah, she also was from Temple Tahuti, but a few years before my
Oh,
time.
cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Most of my Enochian study, though, really came up a couple years ago when I started just getting kind of interested in it, and I picked up the Jacob Klein facsimile edition, and that was like, whoa! Really getting to read Dee's original writings was just like it was awe inspiring, honestly. You know, to really like get into it and see the other things too that seem kind of irrelevant, like the additional diary entries where there aren't any spirit interactions and stuff. Where it's just like, okay, well, here's what's going on. Now we're running off to Prague and all that stuff. Oh, you know, there's XYZ going on today in Mortlake, and it's like, oh, okay, well, it's interesting stuff. But because I think I can't remember anything off the top of my head right now, but you know there are all sorts of little incidences there where it's like, oh well, here's how magic is kind of supposed to express itself, the different ways that it can work when it's like not over the top crazy things, you know.
Yeah. So when you what was it like when you first got in as a teenager with all of these resources that were available to you that didn't exist in my day? Did you get overwhelmed? And what did you cling
A
to?
little
What sort of
bit.
material really carried you through your teenage years of those beautiful early years of study and exploration?
Mm. The Book of Abermelon, the Mather's edition, that was the main one that I really was like totally enamored with. Um, I read through the Greater Key quite a few times, the Arbitel. Anything in particular? It's like the concept of the Holy Guardian Angel is one that I found really interesting, and the idea of the Abermelon, right? That you get to know this particular spirit that's assigned to you from the time that you were born, and that this spirit is supposed to help you out, and the whole experience of getting to know that spirit and all that stuff. I found really interesting, as well as this sort of side of conquering these main spirits that cause problems for yourself and others. Um, Beyond that, in terms of the study material, I was always drawn after evocation. One of the first books I got after I'd read the Oberon Zell stuff as a teenager was the Summoning Spirits by Konstantinos, which was very much not traditional. You know, it's mostly Golden Dawn and Franz Barden style techniques for handling this stuff. But through that is how I got to be aware of a lot of the grimoires, like the Lemegeton and the Arbitel. You know, he has like a whole list of spirits in the back that are drawn from all these places. It's also how I
I'm
got
so
to know
glad you
about Franz
mentioned
Barden's material too.
Constantinos. Constantinos was one of the big books for me as a teenager. I remember the day
Oh,
it
nice.
first appeared in Banyan Books, and I grabbed it right away. And you know, uh, yeah, I couldn't believe the way he approached these things, because it was you say the method was Golden Dawn, and I can't remember for the life of me, since I haven't had I haven't had my copy in a long time. But the attitude he took towards it, I would describe more as grimoire, like more grimoire purist by modern standards. Though I believe you when you say his methodology was a mixture of GD and Franz Barden, because again, I read
Yeah,
that book when it first
there's
came out, and
the
I've never looked at it since, really.
yeah there. You know, it's like, you know, lots of Lester Banish, your Rituals of the Pentagram. hexagram rituals and openings by watchtower and all that stuff. And when it comes to the evocation itself, um, as far as I recall, again, been a long time since I read that. Um, he basically says that when you call the spirit, you're supposed to travel to it in like a spirit vision sort of thing. Which if you look at the older stuff, that's not really a part of it. It's like you're supposed to get in the circle, hold your sword, and say, "Hey, you get here." There's not really much of an idea of you travel in the spirit vision to go say hi to the spirits first and draw them to you. But it is part of the Barden thing, as far as I recall from reading his book on it. I'm not sure if that's part of the Golden Dawn technique. It might be. I haven't studied Golden Dawn material in depth, I have to admit.
I mean, the GD includes, like, it depends what grade you're in. Like if someone's in 5-6, there's a good chance they're being trained in Solomonic magic in preparation to do the Abramelin in 6-5, or whenever they want to do it, usually higher grades. The method for evocation we generally use, if we're not working with the grimoire, is the Z formula. So we use the Z formula. It's very clearly sort of outlined, but it's also a flexible formula. So the main reason we use it, of course, because it's incredibly effective, albeit a different way to skin that cat, so to speak.
Nice.
To use a horrible saying.
It's a good saying.
That is a saying, right?
We all know what it
one
means.
Way to skin a cat. Is that right,
Yep.
though? Who came up with that horrible saying?
I wish we could find out. But yeah, it must have been from very, very hard times, Yeah.
Let's hope.
Jeez. Yeah. Ouch.
I messed up dinner. That's okay. There's more than one way.
Oh, God.
Where's Mr. Snuffles?
No. Just no. Oh my God. Yeah. Life can get hard sometimes in the bayou,
I don't know. Maybe the bayou has more. I don't know. I think it would be more the fields, like the dust basins and
yeah,
like,
the Dust Bowl. The
dust. That sort of era. I could, like, if you're starving, you eat whatever you can eat. I mean, we've all read Moby Dick, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's my favorite thing about Moby Dick.
Oregon Trail stories.
Oh God, yeah. That brother Mason, Aiden, is doing a great job at those sort of things with his YouTube, the Lore Lodge. I'm subscribed to his Patreon for $1, and he does actual real drunk histories, as only an Irish descended, a red-haired kid with a master's in history could do, and he just gets really hammered for real and talks really interesting histories, and it's actually hilarious. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good time.
So start the magic in your teenage years, growing up Protestant and learning about Abramelin and evocation. That somehow led you into Judaism and learning Yiddish.
In a very roundabout way also.
You learned Yiddish from scratch?
Well, I learned it by living in Williamsburg, and I basically that side of things. It was an interest in Kabbalah that got me interested in Judaism in the first place. Which, if you read any magical material written after, like, the mid 19th century, it's like it's all full of Kabbalistic stuff, especially with how much of it is Golden Dawn based one way or another, or Thalamic. You have some sort of Kabbalah or another involved in your stuff. Like I read Aryeh Kaplan's Sci-Fi Yetzirah back in the day, which was pretty interesting. I mean, yeah, of course it was interesting. It does not need to be said, but what I got from it then, I don't really remember very much. I think it was all way over my head. But I just got really enamored with Judaism and was I felt like I should convert, and to really get it, I didn't think I could understand it without being Jewish, right? As a Gentile kid from Tacoma, Washington. So But I had started all that when I was about 14, was when I first really got interested in doing it. I got involved with the community in Seattle when I was 15-ish. Then I started learning Hebrew when I was practicing, because you have to practice before you convert, and there's a very long process for most of it, and it's pretty harrowing and difficult, frankly. But then I worked on learning Hebrew. I got to be mostly fluent in Hebrew by 18, but then I moved to New York, to Muncie, which is an upstate, it's a little hamlet in upstate New York that's a Hasidic community there. And I had almost converted, except the rabbinical court that I was trying to work with wanted me to cut off from my family and everybody I knew from before. And I was like, oh, that's really culty. I'm not going to do that. Then I left, and then I was told that was wrong and all this other stuff. Oh, that's not really a thing that you have to do. You could just find another rabbinical court to work with. And I'd already left. And gone back home at that point. And that was 2015, roughly. And I had then I really dove head first into magical practice then. While I was practicing Judaism at that point, I was like, oh, it's not really allowed. So I'd read stuff, and I had I studied it more than I actually practiced anything after a certain point. Like when I was, from 12 or whatever to 14, 15, I was doing LBRB all the time and, practicing all that stuff, because I was like, oh yeah, this is useful. This is like some weird Kabbalistic stuff here. I'm gonna do this lesser banishment or the pentagram thing. In the downstairs room, I was at my father's house when I was 13. Well, my former stepmother's house technically, but I had a concrete floor because the carpets were taken out, and it was a basement. So I had drawn out this sort of design for a magical working area, which I had this symbolic idea of kind of incorporating a square and a circle into the thing, where I had a square around it and a circle in the center. And I didn't really know if that was from anything or if that was my own idea I had at the time. But then I saw a similar design in, I think it's the Faustian texts, where they incorporate that sort of design in particular. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I was tuning into some Faustian current or something then when I was 13. But my real practice began when I was at 18, is when I really got started with the real magical practice, after coming home from New York. And I got exposed to Frater Rufus Opus's work, particularly Seven Spheres, the Modern Angelic Grimoire, Modern Goetic Grimoire. All those books were still online in PDF form. Oops. So I had I'd read through the books, and I was like, okay, well, and I'd read his blog too, Head for Red, which was great fun. I really loved reading that, and it inspired me. I also read Imperial Arts, and I got to know John. We're good friends. He lives practically down the road from me. We go and visit every so often and chat with him. He's a cool guy.
King the Third?
And he was my teacher. Yeah. Or the fourth. John R. King the Fourth. Yeah.
He lives near us?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right down the road.
Yeah, because for those who don't know, Bartimaeus applied, and delightfully, I was surprised to see you were in Bellingham, Washington, which is literally basically on the Canadian-U.S. border, just like Vancouver is basically on the Canadian. As soon as you drive out of the city of Vancouver, you're at the U.S. border if you go south. Or if you go north, it's just a longer drive to Alaska. But yes. I didn't know John R. King was there. I've got so many bones to pick with that man. Oh, maybe we can actually pick bones on this podcast with him sometime. I've got questions after questions after questions. I don't know if he'll want to. I've read only one of his books. Was it Imperial Arts? Maybe not. It wasn't
the one about the experiences.
Yeah, where he went through all the
Imperial Arts, probably.
Yeah, so that's the one. Yeah. When I got to his section in the back, when I read through the whole book, and he's very, very interesting magician, and I can see why he's so highly regarded. And it looks like he really did cause an earthquake, and a spirit did show him a gold mine, and he gives you instructions to go find it. Just be careful, because there's people there who might shoot you. But the government just let it.
He told me that story.
Yeah, it's
he told me that story himself over the phone, and it's
apparently the government says, yeah, there's a bunch of these little ones all over the place. They're not worth really regulating or protecting or mining. So they're just there if people find them and find a bit of gold. There's nothing wrong with that. We have gold deposits like that all over. That's why people still pan for gold, because there's little bits of gold all over the place.
We have those in central Washington. Yep.
So when you get at the back of his book, Imperial Arts, he really goes at the back of the book against the Imperial is just a polemic against the Golden Dawn. It's just his attempts to smear it and tear it down and debase it in every way he can by straw manning it to death. And I don't know why. My assumption is that because he just doesn't have much information about it. That's usually the problem when we criticize things in such extreme ways. But I don't know. I'm curious. I'm very curious. I'd love to. And the fact that you've gotten to work with him is amazing. And Rufus Opus, of course, said good things about you when I was considering your application. Apparently, you're a bit of a stalker of his. You kind of stalked him to his place, and he said he was pleased to be stalked by you, I think.
I didn't really stalk him. I mean, we talked a few times. I'd write him back in the day, be like, "Hey, what's up?" We hung out actually when I was visiting in 2022 before I had reached the end of my rope with Judaism. I met him and his wife Nicole when I was out here. It was very pleasant getting to hang out with him. I was like, oh, he's a cool dude.
That's what he said. That's what he said.
It's interesting. It's always interesting to see people who only know online in person. It's like there's a totally different dynamic there, and we all have our online persona that can be a bit more, whatever. Sometimes some of us might have a bit more caustic online personality. Some of us might be a bit friendlier online than we are in real life. And I've been told I'm one of those who comes off as a bit of a jerk sometimes online, but I'm just a frank sort of person. So, I don't think it's how I personally write or come across. I think it's just people who don't like
if you're talking about
challenged or discussed. So
if we're in a bad era for understanding debate and argumentation, of course, but also online, like textuality without tonality is nonstop pitfalls. So you do your best with emojis to try and convey that you're not trying to be but it's hard. Either we try to have real dialogue online, or we just give up and succumb to nonstop niceties until the full idiocracy arrives. So I'm all for us trying to keep real dialogue alive. But that's why the podcasting thing is great, because you're face to face with someone and you're talking. And now we're talking live. Now doing it live, people are watching us live. We got like 13 people watching now, which is pretty cool. We're streaming live on Facebook, Magic Without Fears page, or on my Enochian Angel Magic Facebook group. We're on YouTube, and of course, my favorite platform, X.
Oh wow!
Why are we streaming on X? Because there's I don't at all. I have 5 followers.
Okay. I'm not a Twitter guy.
There's a button to stream on it, so I press the button. Why not? I do have. I'm sure there's a few people that can more easily watch it there. Whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. So, what was it like in Judaism, and how did you find your way through learning Hebrew and Aramaic? Because I talk a lot about. I try to encourage people to learn those languages if they're interested, since they're not actually as hard as some other language you might think. Like, a lot of people would probably look at Hebrew and assume it's as hard as Greek. Not even close. Not in a million years. It's not even.
Yeah, the grammar is way simpler.
The grammar, Hebrew grammar, especially biblical Hebrew grammar, where you don't have the modern conventions introduced in the 20th century to help with things like tense and other things, right? Like, in biblical Hebrew, you would just say, you could just say Shmi Bartimaeus, and that's totally grammatically correct. But in modern Hebrew, I believe, what would you say?
I don't know modern Hebrew. The sect I was affiliated with was against learning it specifically. So
Really?
I don't know modern Hebrew hardly at all. Yeah, I mean, I can listen to it and I can understand most of it. I can read it. But to actually speak it, I have no idea. If I read it, it makes sense. Like I can read it and it makes sense. But if I were to try to write anything in modern Hebrew or to speak it, forget about it. I barely know it. Yeah. So
Right. It is
the
very
specific
different,
sect.
and I think it's harder. Modern Hebrew is therefore harder as well, because of
Yeah, there's a lot of
the
merging with
extra
like,
rules.
yeah, they try to merge it with like Western European languages like French for some reason. It's very odd. This is what I've read at
Really?
least. You know that there are a lot of similarities where they, yeah, there's yeah, I'm not
Well,
an
I want to
expert
know
on
why.
Hebrew grammar and
Why
the
did your
Hebrew
sect
linguistics.
reject modern Hebrew? Why did your sect reject modern Hebrew?
Anti-Zionism, and it was considered profaning the language itself because in the particular Hasidic group I was loosely affiliated with, it was considered sacrilegious to use Hebrew outside of religious context specifically. So there are things in modern Hebrew like the word for electricity is chashmal, right, which is it alludes in Kabbalistic ideas to this like divine energy sort of thing. Like you have a whole rank of angels called chashmalim, the angels of the chashmal, whatever that is. Um, which Oh yeah, I'm not well versed enough in Eastern Orthodox theology to say, but as far as I understand, the whole idea of Hashmal as this like uncreated light and all this stuff would probably correspond somewhat to the Orthodox Christians' idea of grace, where it's like this sort of uncreated energy. But again, I have very rough understandings of that end of things. So, um, but yeah, there was that side of it that was considered profaning the language, and just that it came from Zionists was made it considered impure. So it's kind of an interesting thing there. Satmar in particular was very hardcore about that and was like, no, you cannot learn it. It's not good. Biblical Hebrew, yes. But classical Hebrew, I think probably a better way to put it. The rabbinic Hebrew, where there's a lot of other influences also. Greek borrow words and stuff like that. But modern Hebrew was considered an absolute no-no. And
Like
I took it
Sandalphon
seriously.
and
So
Metatron.
they probably have ways to convert. Yeah. Oh yeah. Those is Greek
Those are
influenced. Yeah.
Greek, Greek words. I can see
Yeah.
definitely that was such an excellent example of why they might reject modern Hebrew if you're taking a word like chashmal from, and which we know as hashmal. Like I was just working with the hashmalim all the last few weeks, actually, doing a bunch of things with my students and myself. So like, yeah, like if I heard that word being
Nice.
said profanely all the time for electricity, oh, that would be weird. That would be weird if I was a religious
Mm-hmm.
Jewish rabbi with that kind of paradigm. That I never thought about the not appropriation, but like the alteration of previously sacred Hebrew words and having them subverted for modern technology or other new neologisms. That seems that I can see that being a big issue. And if we had done this interview a year ago, I would have asked you to let people know what Zionism is. But I think I don't have to do
Oh,
that in the current world.
since October
So
2023. Yeah, probably not.
what I will ask, yeah, what I will ask is, how would the group you were in have defined Zionism, and what does that mean?
They would have defined it very much in the same way that it is now. It's a secular Jewish messianic movement, basically. That believes that the Jews have an absolute right to the land of Israel and all this stuff. The main reason Satmar and the associated Hasidic groups are against it is essentially because in their paradigm, where they don't believe that the Messiah has come yet, it's like a great sin to go and take the land before the Messiah shows up. So they basically say that they have to wait. They just have to wait in the exile, and whatever. Eventually, their messianic ideal will show up, and then they'll get to go back there and live there with their third temple and all that stuff. But they don't believe in taking action to do it now. That's the essential distinction there. They have the same belief as Zionists, where it's like oh yeah, it's the homeland. We should eventually be there, but they don't believe in military action to go and take it over to establish a Jewish king situation there. Jewish political reign over the land of Israel until their Messianic era. That's pretty much that.
Yes, so that would make the current state of things seem heterodox to a lot of communities. We don't need to dig into this topic too much, since it's
politics. I'm not into talking
being
politics.
dug into by everyone and their So, but that is very interesting to know, since you come out of one of those communities for all ostensible purposes, right? You may not have been born in it, but you certainly spent really formative years. And formative years.
Oh yeah.
Right? Key formative years. Like, one of the reasons I was only in the Golden Dawn 7 years, I went through 7 initiations. I had a great time. I wish that it had never ended. I wish we could have kept things going the way they were, more or less. Well, with some changes, of course, to some of the things. But that happened during those formative years of 15 to 23. And so that's one of the reasons, like, forever I'm sort of a GD person, even though, it's probably only composes 20% of the work I do now, because of course, even, but that's, again, people don't understand that in the GD, you open up to all kinds of specializations and different avenues that are different from what people know from Regardi's publications and other books like that. So yeah, it's a training ground for other things, not just not a isolated, self-contained system. But I think we're spreading the word. I think more people are realizing that, if it's not a lifelong fraternity like the OTO is, right, where you don't even need to be thelemic to join the OTO and spend your whole life as a member. They're welcoming of that, apparently. I was very surprised when I found that out. I was like, oh, this changes everything how I understood you guys from before. I was misinformed. And that's one of the things, one of the reasons we're building these bridges and connecting and doing podcasts, is to just share information and stuff so we can all be better informed.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of this. That's why I'm here.
So when did you do the Abramelin?
Okay, so that's a whole other set of worms to get into. Are
you ready for it?
When I had done the truncated form of it, it wasn't. To be fair, when I had the discussion with my patron as to how to proceed with that issue, I was told that it's like I'd already had the whole past year and a half. I'd been in a highly ascetic state, and I had there are certain penitential prayers that I was instructed to say for a long time before even getting the form of the rite I was supposed to use. And that was back in, I'm coming up on my 5th. Yeah, it was the year before COVID. That's how I remember. It was the other BC before COVID. It was 2019 when I had done that. And I'm looking forward to the 5th anniversary. I had to recalculate the date since it was according to the Hebrew calendar before, and I was instructed to change it to the solar calendar. So this year it's on Pentecost, the feast day. But it was an amazing thing. I'm not exactly sure which aspect you're looking for here, just as to when I did it or how, or what happened. Like,
well, you can approach the question definitely however you want. Your presentation at EnochiaCon has to do with the nature of the Abramelin and Holy Guardian Angels, so I don't want you to spill all the beans here.
That's
live,
what I'm trying to avoid.
But you could definitely salt no, not salt the ground. I don't know. Tease people, give some people some exciting insights and ideas. This is your moment to
all right.
To lure these curious practitioners in about that whole operation, since it's such a hot topic. And hey, even I got to finally make a contribution to Abramelin stuff, right? If you noticed on Facebook, Aaron Leach and them were all talking about whether or not it should start on Passover or the Tabernacle. So I grabbed my Abramelin, and the only one I have anymore is my 2001 German copy by Georg Dane. Good job with with that text. It's the German copy is a beautiful little book. It's tiny and it's got a ribbon and everything. It's very lovely. And I looked up the section they were looking at, and I was like, yeah, it doesn't say tabernacle or Passover. It says, Easter.
Ostern.
And Osten. And then of course Alex Sumner made a post cutting out my contribution, and he's been trashing me ever since, before he knew about me. So I wasn't surprised to see that, but I did push back.
Oh, fun.
I did make a little fuss because, like, come on, guys, come on.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Aaron Leach blocked me for finding Alexei Tchaikovsky's Halloween costume funny, so I got removed from the Solomonic.
I remember that going down.
Yeah, good times.
Well,
yeah,
to be fair,
that's
she
cool.
had
We
just
made
done
a contribution.
She had just like done a hit piece on Glitch Bottle about him, right? Like, so.
Oh, I don't pay enough attention.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Really... She read this statement on Glitch Bottle about occultists and toxic patriarchal male occultists, but in private, she had circulated to everyone behind the scenes that she had written this about Aaron Leach, and that struck me as a very nasty thing to do, and I think a lot of us lost respect for her, and I think it was very manipulative for her to use Glitch Bottle and Alex's platform in that way to score cheap shots against Aaron, and yeah, really gross behavior, but hopefully everyone's learned from it and moved on.
Yeah, hopefully everybody's moved on. Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't realize that was the exact context of that. Okay. Yeah, so...
I don't think anyone knew the exact context, but whatever. We got no fears here, right, brother?
Exactly. Yeah, okay, so... Well, one of the things that people tend to like wonder about, I think, this is far back in the day. I don't really participate very much in online occult discussions. I have more. I spend more time defending Gnosticism and keeping it from just devolving into New Age crap. That's my big internet mission these days. Is look, here's what the Gospel of Thomas actually says. What in the hell are you doing? Like, come on, like this is not the same thing as New Ageism. But I digress. That's a whole other issue. But
I want to get into that issue with you. That sounds like a great issue to get into. Oh,
yeah, that'll be fun.
Be a fun discussion. A really enlightening essay that I read. I even reviewed that essay and commentated on it on this podcast in its early days of lockdowns. And that was Moshe Adel. I think it was Adel who did a whole essay just demonstrating that Gnosticism, which of course was Christianity, right? Let's not forget that. The Gnostics we're talking about aren't people that consider themselves Gnostics. They were people that considered themselves Christians. Others just thought they were the wrong sort, so they labeled them Gnostics later on or whatever. I'm not an expert on Gnosticism and all, and don't even consider myself a Gnostic at all. But Idel proved that Proto-Kabbalah, of course, because this is pre-Middle Ages, Proto-Kabbalah influenced Gnosticism and not the other way around. And of course, someone might debunk that paper or prove there's more to it than that, but so far no one has, and it's been a few years. So that leads me to think that Idel might have been correct. Imagine that, Moshe Idel being correct.
He even disagreed with Gershom Scholem on that.
He's the man. He disproved Gershom Scholem. That's why I can't recommend people start with Gershom Scholem anymore. I mean, probably they still should, but Idel really overturned a lot of his observations, in my opinion. But again, they're both the two. They're the two heavy hitters of academic scholarship in Kabbalah. So read both of them, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So what's the biggest problem that's misunderstanding, I think, going on with Gnosticism in your estimation? What ideas are you defending it from?
Well, so I have a whole thesis that I'm working on putting together the sources for to write a whole book about regarding Gnosticism as a perfectly valid expression of traditional Christianity. In terms of, we'll say, like early Catholicism, like early Orthodoxy, early Christianity, before the Great Schism, like kind of up until that time, the doctrinal ideas and the symbolism and all this stuff, that basically that there isn't really that great of a distinction between Gnostic doctrines, at least what the heresiologists were talking about when they weren't just spewing out weird stories that may or may not have happened. And if they did happen, then I don't think that should serve as a reflection on Gnosticism in any way. There are all sorts of crazy people who do horrendous things that you don't need to be a Gnostic to do that sort of thing. If we're going off the stories from Epiphanes of Salamis, he's got some pretty grody stuff that he writes about. But basically, I've been working on doing a study through Against Heresies by Irenaeus to really find out what his exact arguments against Gnosticism were, and to basically prove from the Nag Hammadi scriptures and other extant Gnostic writings and writings of the fathers and all this stuff that the essential ideas and concepts of Gnosticism are not different from those of traditional Christianity. Now, by traditional Christianity, I mean pre-Protestant Reformation and pre-evangelical weirdness and all that stuff. For example, one of the arguments that Irenaeus puts out is that the whole idea of aeons is preposterous. This idea that there's emanations from God and they have personalities and all this stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. How could you think such a thing? But his line of reasoning could very easily be used to also disprove angels. Christians shouldn't believe in angels if you follow his exact line of reasoning. That's just one example of quite a few. That's without getting into the Gnostic scripture stuff. But a lot of people just take the Gnostic label and then use it as an excuse to espouse New Age balderdash, as my bishop would say. He loves the term balderdash. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's a great word. I've come to appreciate it. Describing some of the crap I see online.
I'll bring it back. Let's bring it back.
Yeah, for sure.
The other one I like. The other one I usually go to is I think it's an Irish word term. Banjaxed. I like banjaxed.
Oh,
you don't say that one. Yeah, you've heard it, right?
One. Malarkey. No, I've never heard banjaxed before.
Oh, it's banjaxed. It was banjaxed last night. It was banjaxed.
Wow. Malarkey is the only Irish one I've heard. I'm not sure which Irish that is. So,
the Irish come up with some of the best. Like in Belfast, they have some great expressions. Like if they call people like head melters, like you're melting my head. Jesus, you're melting my head. Stop it. You can imagine saying that. I'm sure in some circumstance.
Yeah.
And they call crazy girls bunny boilers, which I thought was remarkable. Not for any bad reason. Remarkable because it's literally a cultural appropriation of an event that happened in the movie Fatal Attraction. So Fatal Attraction, yeah, because at the end, Glenn Close, spoiler warning if you haven't seen this 40-year-old movie, in the end, the guy comes home and the woman he's had an affair with has boiled his kid's bunny on the stove. And then there's the climaxing, lots of killing and death. And so the Irish came up with that scene led to the Irish having the term bunny boilers for we would say, they're crazy or they're nuts. And they're like, hilarious. They're a bunny boiler. Anyway,
that's great. It's so funny. Wow.
The wit
Even
of
if you
the
haven't
Irish
seen the movie, you can get it. Even if you haven't seen the movie, it's totally a phrase that it's like,
you just need to explain it.
Wow, that's hilarious.
Shout out to Belfast.
For real.
Fair stuff. Yeah, shout out. So speaking of Gnosticism, the Gnosis is something I obviously can get behind, and I think Christianity fundamentally does have built in this idea of a gnosis within it, which is just a knowledge, an internal. It's gnosis to me is very tied to faith. That's why I don't like the term UPG, because to me gnosis is always subjective, and that's what defines it as truth. True. As soon as you claim that it's gnosis could be objective truth, I think it ceases to be gnosis and just becomes fact. But these are my own ways of thinking about it, and there's lots of ways to think about it, especially since the way when one person uses gnosis is not necessarily the way another person uses it. Like, it's been explained to me by some of the leading Hermetic scholars, Hanegraaff, Litwa, and that, you know, there's gnosis in Hermetica, in the Hermetism, right? But that gnosis isn't like whatever you think it is. That gnosis is a specific realization, and when you have it, you have the gnosis, and you can tell someone what it is, and it doesn't spoil it, because telling someone it isn't gnosis. The gnosis is the mystery, and the mystery is the experience. So the gnosis of Hermeticism is
experiential knowledge.
Yeah, the gnosis of Hermeticism, I can tell you what it is, and it doesn't spoil you finding the gnosis yourself, because you have to experience it, and the experience is that of light, LVX, right? The gnosis of Hermeticism, or Hermetism, let's be precise, is light. But it is also the gnosis of Hermeticism, because they both are Hermetica. So yeah, but, you know, until you have the experience that all is light, knowing it doesn't equal gnosis.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a discussion I had with my priest back when I had first got affiliated with this Gnostic church, before, in this weird in between time, you know, when I had left, I gotten kicked out of converting to Judaism by those rabbis and stuff, and I come back home, and I had a friend in the Solomonic group who was a Gnostic deacon at the church in Seattle. He was like, "Oh, you should come and check it out," and I was like, "Okay, sounds good to me." And I came, and I fell in love with the mass and all that stuff, but I still had this sort of, I would say, frankly, it was a bit of a toxic and codependent relationship with Judaism. So that's how I ended up still converting at the end of that whole thing. But oh well. But we discussed this whole matter of gnosis back then, back in the day, and he was like, "Yeah, you know, it's like, it's not fact collection. It's not that you can read as many books and put all these things into a basket and have all these facts. It's experiential knowledge of the divine, you know." And this is my interpretation of that further. You know, like, when people think of Gnosticism, they think of dualism. That's like the first thing that comes to mind, is like this extreme dualism where it's like the world is evil and only God is good and all this stuff. But it's like that's only the first half of the whole message of gnosis. You know, it's like, you know, when you can acknowledge that there is a side of corporeality that is corrupt, you know, which I think is obvious. If anybody looks at what's going on in the world around us, you know, it's like, it's pretty obvious that things are not perfect. There's all sorts of things that go wrong all the time, and you know, people get horrible illnesses, you know, who are decent, normal people. There are countless people who are homeless, who are perfectly normal, decent people, who just, you know, they got a bad car wreck one day and lost everything. I met somebody like that recently, actually, when I was taking a walk down here. You know, it's really obvious, if you look at the world, that there is something fundamentally wrong with it, that is not that cannot be fixed through human means in and of themselves. But the second half of the gnosis formula, so to speak, is that aspect of knowing that there is God, and that there's the kingdom of heaven within. You know, as it says in the Gospels, you know, Christ himself teaches that, you know, the kingdom of God is within you, and I think it's in Luke, if I remember right. But people mostly get stuck. The people who are serious about Gnosticism oftentimes get stuck on that first bit there of like, oh yes, the world is evil, and, you know, you have to hate the world and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, you know, you have to acknowledge that this isn't it. You know, that's what hating the world means, right? Is recognizing that this is not everything that there is, and that there's far higher, more exalted things than our corporeal existence. But that second aspect of recognizing that there is the transcendent and immanent God is the second half of the Gnostic formula, and it's something that you can't get unless you get it. You know, it's that sort of thing. You know, it's like, as much as you know, you could pontificate about it and put out theological theses and all this stuff, it's like, you're still, unless you have the experience, you don't have gnosis. You know, it's the same idea as with the Hermeticists. You know,
The mystery is the experience, is what one of my friends
exactly
during COVID always said. And you might know this friend of mine who said that, all until she drilled it into my head. She was at the time an 82-year-old elder in the traditions of the West Coast. And this is Marilyn Mother Bear. And she worked very closely with
Huh.
Oberon and lived with him at Anafin. If you know the Anafin community up in the Emerald Triangle, I got to go up to their property there and
Hmm.
had a great day and a night, and we played lots of music and I got to see the whole property and everything. But
Oh, that's
while I
awesome.
was working with Marilyn and her magical cauldron of the Western Sea for their Eleusinian rites, which COVID, of course, interrupted, and then I had to eventually drop out when I came up to Vancouver and had to go through quarantine and just all this kind of
Oh, dear
stuff. It
Lord.
was very, but for the time I did get to participate. I was working with Oberon Zell personally and hanging out with him
Oh,
in
wow.
person a lot, and so I got to work with him. I met him at PantheaCon, but then he came up to Isis Oasis and we hung out, had lots of dinners together and chats, and then he worked with us in the Lucini Mysteries. So actually, when you come back for a round two, it'd be fun. I'll get Oberon to join us, and me, and Oberon can have a little threesome here
Yeah, that'd be
and talk
great.
about
I've never met
things
him,
from a
so
whole
that'd
other
be great
perspective.
fun.
Well, that would be. He would love to. He's always
Nice.
said he wanted to jump on the podcast and stuff, and what a great chance because he could talk to you about you. His book influenced you, got you going, you might say. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
Oberon's
it was my first
a character.
exposure. Yeah, it was my first
He
exposure
runs.
to magic, like real magic written out in a book form. That was really meant for younger people, probably a few years older than I was. But there was this other one that was put up by Llewellyn. God, I don't even know how long ago. It was a bit before. It was right before I found Oberon Zell's book. It was called, what was it? The Guide for the Apprentice Wizard or something by Cornelius Rumstuckle. My mom saw it at a store. I was like, oh, I'll get this for him. This is just some whatever, goofy Harry Potter shtick or something. So, but, looking back on it, I think I found it online at one point, and it's like, it has all sorts of like practical meditation exercises that teaches you how to construct your elemental weapons. It's really it's basically another book that's just a system of basic magic for, it teaches you even how to cast a circle and stuff. It's like written for preteens. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I got some real exposure and training in magical stuff when I was like 11. I didn't make any of this stuff back then. I don't think my mom would have let me, but yeah, yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool to get to actually talk with him. I've heard he's a pretty cool guy. So
Someone
yeah.
asked me the other day what brought about the occult revolution we're in right now, and I wish I had remembered to say the answer I actually used to always give. I won't, and I also won't say. The podcast I interviewed on will come out this month, but I won't tell anyone what it was. But I wish I'd remembered to say I think it could have largely been caused by Harry Potter, because those books came
Oh
out
yeah.
while I was at Temple Tahuti and doing that, and they were all over the bookstores where we would, leave flyers. And we talked a lot about, we were like, I think this generation is going to grow up and cause some kind of like magical heyday when they grow up and discover that there is real magic. It's just not necessarily what it is in Harry Potter, but it's still
Yeah,
pretty darn
sure. It's much
interesting.
better. It's much better than
We
the
have a
stuff from Harry Potter,
question.
as far as I'm concerned.
We have a question from someone. Maybe you can answer this question. They ask, can you compare the Gnostic Mass between the ecclesiastical Gnostic Mass and the OTO Gnostic Mass? And after that, I want to talk to you about the difference between Gnostic dualism versus Gnostic monism, in case you've actually read the
Ooh.
EIO here, which is, of course, Jose Gabriel Alegria Sabagal's Gnosticism, monistic Gnosticism, developed
That
out of
sounds
the
interesting.
Ophite tradition. Yeah, because that was always my
Curious.
packadillos with Gnosticism, was the dualism thing just didn't make the idea that the world is evil, and the spiritual world is good. It's very Gospel of John, but still I find it very gross personally. The idea that this world is evil, and the idea of Yaldabaoth and the creator gods, I absolutely dislike fundamentally. But a monistic Gnosticism of this Ophite variety is very interesting to me. And
Yeah, that'll be
it's just
interesting.
come out soft cover.
I haven't read that book. I've mostly, most of the time when I've read these things, I focused mostly on primary sources rather than more modern
Yeah.
works. I only recently started reading more modern works on Gnosticism after I finally got through the Nag Hammadis, which it didn't take me that long actually, but it felt like a long time. Took me quite a few months to really get through them. You got to take your time to really understand it. Okay, but question, right? Okay,
I
so
want to
can you
say
compare the
before,
Gnostic mass?
wait,
Yes.
and before you
Okay.
move on
Yeah.
from Nag Hammadi, there's a new course on the Nag Hammadi out by Dr. David Litwa, the translator of Hermetica 2 text, the technical Hermetica.
Really?
He's got a whole Nag Hammadi course. You can get it. Check out his Patreon, check out his YouTube channel, and it's like $50. And it goes through the whole thing, and he's already working on upgrades. I've talked to him a lot about it. I'm going to do it as soon as I have a spare minute. And yeah, so because
Wow.
the Nag Hammadi, he told me, as I question him constantly, though not too much, hopefully, is the evidence that there was some crossover. Well, it's one of the things it provides is evidence that there was crossover between early Gnostic and Hermetic communities. And Hermetic communities were, of course, distinctly pagan, and Gnostic communities were just Christians. And so the Nag Hammadi texts are evidence that there was crossover between those. But now back to Rebecca's question. Rebecca's from Seattle, so thanks, Rebecca, for having this great question. We'll see what Bartimaeus here has to say about it. And
Okay.
I'll put Dr. Litwa's course in the show notes.
Cool. All right. So, can you compare the Gnostic Mass between the Ecclesiastical Gnostic Mass and the OTO Gnostic Mass? So, first of all, I can only speak about the Mass as it is performed in the specific church that I'm a part of, which is the Ecclesia Gnostica. And any statements I make regarding Gnosticism and Christian thought are my own. They're not the official statements of the EG, just for the record. But the Ecclesia Gnostica, our head bishop is he's Bishop Stefan Heller. He's doctor, and he was brought up in Hungary, and he's 92 now, I think. So he was brought up in an aristocratic Hungarian Catholic family. So his whole approach to the Mass and the sacraments is informed by Gnosticism, but essentially tries to stay as close as possible to the Catholic ceremonies. So there's a book called Science of the Sacraments by Charles Leadbeater, of the liberal Catholic movement and the Theosophical Society, and there's some parts of his history that are a little bit controversial, but we'll not discuss that for now. But he basically outlines the liturgy, and essentially what he did was he took the Tridentine rite of the Catholic Church. For those who are unaware, that's the traditional Latin Mass, as it's commonly referred to. It was the Latin rite of the Mass, is celebrated from before the liturgical reforms of the 60s, and Vatican II, and all that stuff. He basically took those rites, that form of the Mass, and just kind of rewrote some of it to avoid some of the more what's the term that I want? Like, in the Tridentine rite, there's a lot of self-effacement of, like, referring to how sinful we are, and the purpose of the sacrament to elevate us from our sinfulness and to forgive our sins. There's a lot of emphasis on sin in the Tridentine rite, and so he basically rewrote it to avoid that, to kind of go around it a bit. Like, there's still a confession, but instead of being a confession of how worthless we are, it's like, oh, we screw up every once in a while. Please forgive us in your mercy. We're going to try to do better. But it is Catholic to in the broad sense of the word. As a friend of mine, a traditionalist bishop, good old Agostino Tamaturgo, says, he refers to some things as lower C Catholic instead of capital C Catholic. It's in the tradition of the Western Roman Rite, rather than a whole new magical ceremony. Like, there's no invocations of, like, Hermes or Thoth or something in there, at least not in an explicit way. It's very much focused on the Holy Trinity. We have an invocation of the Holy Sophia, which is there was a lecture, a homily that I heard from Bishop Heller when I was down there to visit, when I went there with my wife and one of our clergy up here, and we all went down to go visit the bishop in Los Angeles, and he gave a very interesting homily where he referred to the Catholics, the exoteric Catholic Church, as preserving this sort of devotion to the Holy Sophia through the adoration of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And basically, with how he explained it, is that the Blessed Virgin Mary is the physical manifestation of Sophia, right? So there's the invocation of Sophia as this higher principle that encompasses the Blessed Virgin and all the other sort of archetypes included underneath her sort of underneath her type, like all the other divine feminine aspects that are reflective of Sophia. So all of that said, it's an entirely different ceremony than that of the OTO Gnostic Mass. Crowley's Mass it's interesting. Like, for one, there's no naked ladies on the altar. It's one of the big differences. I went to the OTO Gnostic Mass in Seattle a couple times. It was interesting. That resembles a lot more lodge magic stuff, where you have the hand signs that everybody else makes, and like Nietzsche is invoked as a saint. Like that's a big difference between the two. It's kind of, but the focus is also different, because the Ecclesia Gnostica Mass, and I would think, I don't know about all the other ecclesiastical Gnostic groups, but the general idea is that they try to be Catholic to some degree, right? Their focus is on the transubstantiation of the host and the wine into the body and blood of Jesus Christ, not towards whatever is going on in the OTO Gnostic Mass, which is, its own expression of a desire to physically incarnate the divine into physical matter, but it's not the same as in the EG or the other like Catholic inspired traditions. You're muted.
Sorry, I'll get the hang of that. It looks like this is indeed a priestess from the Seattle EGC, perhaps, that has made the comment. So that's actually really cool and really great to have that little
for sure.
bit of dialogue from you, Rebecca. Yeah, inclusion of Sophia versus Babylon. Interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a difference. It's like the key difference is mostly just that focus on specifically trying to transubstantiate the host and the wine into the body and blood of Christ, rather than whichever aspect of divinity the OTO rite is aiming to manifest, which I can't really recall actually exactly what that was. I'm embarrassed to admit. To be fair, I haven't really been involved with the Lema for a long time, so.
Yes, you have more experience than I, and my understanding would be, if I had to analyze it theologically, is, well, the Gnostic Mass of the EGC is Thelemic, correct? The EGC is Thelemic religion, right? It's not Christian, Catholic, or anything.
Oh,
or maybe it's Catholic, or I think they do call it Catholic.
Yeah.
So it's not Christian. It's a different religion than Christianity. So the contexts couldn't be more different from a Thelemic Mass versus a Christian Mass. The entire premise is entirely different. So I don't know how one would compare them. That would be like comparing the Christian Mass to Jewish Seder. Like what's the difference between the two? What's the difference between the Jewish Seder and the Christian Mass?
They happened around the same time, actually. If you look at some of the historical documents here, the Christians were first recounting the Passion and the Resurrection, right around the time the Seder was established. But
yes,
anyway.
So this is actually a good point. Rebecca says, "There's no part of me that is not of the gods." That really sums it up, actually. So a Christian Mass, there's a God, and maybe in a Gnostic Thelemic Mass, there is multiple gods. So you have a difference between monotheism and pantheism, polytheism. Sorry, right there. There's a very big distinction between the two masses for those interests.
Oh yeah,
I think we handled that quite tidily. And thank you for your help with that, Rebecca. Yeah, very cool to have interaction with the listeners on the podcast. Finally, this is how I wanted to do it in the very beginning, and maybe we're doing it now. Yeah. Very fun.
Nice.
Very fun. You're such an interesting guy. I'm so glad you applied and did the application right as well. Like followed all the guidelines. I think, I don't know if I know you're sort of involved in the psychic world where you live as well, and online. And a lot of psychics sort of tried to apply after that, but they didn't follow any of the guidelines and mainly wanted to prove to us that they could channel Dee and Kelly in front of our eyes at the conference, which is not really the point of the conference, but I appreciate the interest and enthusiasm.
I think I might know exactly who that was. Anyway,
hey, we're having fun here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I use the psychic title mostly as an advertising thing. Just to be completely straight. I mean, I use tarot cards and I Ching and stuff. And, if you practice any serious spiritual stuff over time, you'll develop some weird tendencies, but weird in the original
Well,
sense of the term.
psychism is kind
But
of
yeah,
like a technological implementation of intuition, I think, in a lot of ways.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically just for my tarot reading business, though, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not involved in the psychic scene here. I just read
Yeah.
cards at bars and stuff. So,
All right. I'll put
it's fun.
Rebecca's last comment on the screen. She says, "Communion of this with the saints, identification and a declaration of self equals God." I assume that is a thelemic theological belief, and that is very interesting. Yeah.
Yep,
So
quite
one of the
curious.
things in Thelema is this. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of yourself as God does seem to be something that pops up a lot from Thelemic, the devout Thelemic community, and yeah. So that's a very distinct difference between Thelema and a lot of other religions, I would say. That would be
Yeah.
absolutely the most heretical statement I could make in my own faith or my own context. It's repellent to me, but more power to you. It's I mean, that would that Nietzsche would be a very good saint for you, perhaps, or a version of Nietzsche would, because there's different ways to read Nietzsche, and I think there's the parochial ways, and then there's a slightly more nuanced way. There's also different periods of philosophers. Philosophers have periods, right, where they think, and often we function heuristically in certain frameworks just to see where it leads, and then a couple books later where the philosophers like, yeah, I've moved on to a different angle. Like Slavoj Žižek's new book that's coming out this month actually is Christian atheism, and it's questioning if the reductivist materialists as their only way forward essentially need to become Christian and change Christianity from within. So that'll be a fun read to finally have a book from Žižek that deals head on, full length, over 300 pages of his theology. And if you know Žižek, then well, anything above 100 pages is going to kick your butt. So get your get training for that. Yeah.
Right.
So interesting stuff. It's really cool to compare the different forms of worship and the sacrifice of the Mass in the different denominational groups that are in the magical world, especially, right? We have this whole tradition of alternative clergy with apostolic succession from Valentinian traditions to God, I don't even know all the names because it's not my communities. I'm not involved in any of that, but yeah. What brought you to the path of ordination and the priesthood after leaving Judaism as a convert?
I've always been drawn towards that. My mom told me from when I was like 3 or 4 or something. I would always be no, I think it was like 3. Basically, the time I was like 3 or so, I would always be talking about, oh, look at this wonderful world that God has made. Talk about how much I loved God and stuff. So she was like, this one's going to be part of the clergy at some point. It's just an inclination that I have. I just feel drawn towards God in that way. I'm not a priest. I'm not in major orders. I'm a humble doorkeeper or a porter, depending on the lingo you want to use in my church. But I just feel very drawn towards serving God in that way. Not just because of not just the side where it's for myself, where it's like, yeah, I love God, so yeah, sure, of course, I'm going to serve Him. But there is a side also of being able to help others as well that appeals to me about the clerical state. When it comes specifically to the sacramental Christian side of things, being able to really perform the sacrifice of the Mass is something that, to me, just is like an awe-inspiring thing. Like the whole idea of like making the triune God, the second person of the Holy Trinity, manifest in the world as we live now through the accidents of bread and wine is just like, whoa. I mean, and being at the altar now, when you're just sitting in the pews, it's like there's a lot of the energetic stuff that you can perceive, if you're sensitive, but actually being at the altar, every week for the past, like, what, since last June, I think, is when I put on the cassock officially and was brought up as a lay server, and I've been brought up a bit further in minor orders since then. It rivals it rivals many of the experiences I've even had magically, with my angelic invocation experiments. It rivals that every week. So, not going to
Beautiful.
say, maybe you should start coming over to mass and start trying to serve at the altar, but there's some very profound, there is a profound mystery that occurs at the altar every time that the mass is celebrated. And I feel honored to be able to participate in that, even in the small way that I do now. And in the future, I hope to be able to really do that as well, to be able to participate in the continuation of that mystery, also to share that with others too.
Having experiences in worship that trump personal ritual experiences, I think that would qualify as making you what we call churchy. You're a churchy guy.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, you're churchy. I love it. I love. For me, one of my favorite things about occultism is how it does tend to, for many people, take them from on a strange journey from their churchiness of their Sunday childhood upbringing, full circle back to a churchy adulthood that is different from how it was, but to most people observing from the outside, it's the same exact thing. Like, oh, so you left the church and went back? It's like, no, you don't understand. A lot happened. It's like,
yeah, right.
But you go to church. It's my favorite thing in the world. And you used to go to church, yes. And I didn't like it. Okay. You just went back to the church. But you didn't just go back to the church, especially the church you were in. It's fun to see how there's a reason religion is important. In the Golden Dawn, we consider it to be the thing which, do you know the quote? It's religion in the Golden Dawn is that which guides and regulates life. Religion is that which guides and regulates life. Which is why it's so important that the Golden Dawn didn't efface religion and become one and allowed people to be whatever religion they are, because the system is meant to amplify your religious life, not replace it. And that's why Thelema was such a speciation away from the Golden Dawn in every way imaginable, because it basically turned the Golden Dawn into a kind of a religion, and much more, as any Thelemite will tell you, which is, it's great. I think it's cool that there's a magical religion out there. Even cooler that it's based on the Golden Dawn.
Right. Yeah, wow. I was not familiar with that quote, but that touches on something that has been an area of contemplation for me as of late. Is this the importance of the exoteric side of religion instead of only the esoteric, which I touch on in my book on the tarot a bit, and specifically in regards to the High Priestess and the Hierophant. The High Priestess alludes to the whole esoteric side of spirituality, mysticism, the mysteries, the subconscious aspects, and the basically everything that's interior about spirituality, where it's like your own understanding, your own experience, and the side of things that are secret, that aren't shown to everybody else. Well, Hierophant speaks to that side of the mysteries as they can be communicated to others and lived in your own life. And that's just been something I've been thinking about lately. That's just been an area of contemplation about this importance of exoteric religion, as in terms of lifestyle and thought as well, in order to ground the esoteric. Because without a way to ground the esoteric concepts, it ends up, things can either go totally goofy, like some of the accusations that Epiphanes of Salamis makes, or else it ends up not really existing in any real way. It ends up just being something that, like you might get high and think of Platonic solids or something, instead of actually living spirituality. Yeah, it's been a big thing for me lately, just thinking through that side of things.
That's one of my favorite things anyone's ever said on this podcast, what you just said.
Which part? Getting high and thinking about Platonic solids?
You might... That's such a West Coast, Pacific Northwest thing to say. I'm just going to claim it for our own and on behalf of all the other occultists of the Pacific Northwest. You ever get high and think of platonic solids? Yeah.
Gotta do a little bit more than that, though. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you
could
can
use
roll
that
them
as a
and see if
promotional quote.
you can roll the platonic solid and see if you get a 20.
True.
You know. We have a question. We got Jorge Quinones in the house. He says, "God bless Dr. Holler. I owe him so much. Unfortunately, his Catholic flavor turned me off from joining his church 30 years ago. I'm more of a flavor type of guy." And Jorge, who has the great YouTube Mesoamerica channel and is a GD adept of no small training himself, coming out of the
nice
Monastra lineage. And his question is, have you or do you know of anyone that has performed the rituals of the Book of Jude, or Yao,
or Yeu?
Yeah.
No, I do not actually.
Tomato.
I don't think anybody who has would talk about it. I haven't. Nope. I don't know anybody else who has either. Again, though, I don't think anybody would talk about it if they had. So
Why?
yeah, probably. There are some things that are a little too profound to talk about, I think. Or there's like that side of like the sort of humility side to where people don't want to talk about stuff that's that's sort of personal and that sort of thing. It'd be interesting to actually do it, but it's like I wonder what would happen afterwards. That's the thing that has me a little bit like maybe, but it's like again, what happens afterwards? I'd also have to make sure to find a place that's like far enough away from people to really do it and have it go well. I think because if you're getting yourself into this sort of hyper ecstatic state through those rituals, that might be a little bit too tough to be around other influences afterwards. I think. I don't know. I've read the ritual forms, but actually doing them in practice is something I have not done.
Yeah,
maybe I will.
yeah. I mean,
We'll see.
I don't know much about it myself. Yeah.
It's a Sethian theurgic text, and basically the idea is to overcome the seals of the archons. You have these oils. What is it? First, you have the water and myrtle or something. That's for the first gate, and then you have these different oils and incenses, different perfumes that you toss on a censer to burn, and you have these invocations and all these long like the barber's names, like in the PGM. Lists and lists of those that you say, and you're supposed to overcome the archons and attain some great initiatic experience of some sort. So, it sounds cool, but I'm a perfectionist, so I wouldn't want to do it where I am right now. I'd have to be a bit further out from society, I think, to really do it.
Yeah. I don't know. I know Jorge's very, very into that stuff and the Gnostics and the Archons. So yeah, you might have to talk to him about it sometime. Maybe we can get his ass to Vancouver to be a part of EnokiaCon with us. Today's the last day to get the 3 monthly payment plan on your sign up. So folks, if you want to help us out and support this wonderful conference by joining the Cyber Conference or in person, just go to enokiacon.com and you can pay over 3 months. And today's the last day to do that. So I'm glad we're getting the word out a bit. I just don't want people to miss out on that thing. There was a cry for it. So I did 6 hours of programming and set up late into the night one day and made it doable. And now it's available. So there you go, folks. Yeah. And man, I feel like we should just like have you, before you on your way up to Vancouver, just have you like swing by Mr. King's house and throw him in the trunk and kidnap him to present with up here. He would be a great presenter to have, and the fact that he's actually only a stone throw away.
Yeah, he's not too far away. He's right down the road, pretty much.
Ask him if he'll join the lineup.
I told him about the event. I asked, he said sounds interesting, but I haven't heard much about it after that. So
he would be a very welcome presenter.
I could encourage him to write you and see. So
you just encourage him to do it. All we need is him to say yes. Yeah, and you're driving up anyway. So yeah. Oh, he's a yeah. his work speaks for itself. The faculty of Abrac is highly regarded by serious practitioners, so much so that
Oh, yeah,
Mihai
it's a great book.
Vertejero, yeah, he's even rebounded in a beautiful hard binding for himself.
I
He loves
saw
it
that.
so much. Yeah, right. So, like, yeah, I don't mind. I like it when I read a serious practitioner's work and it challenges me. If it didn't challenge me, I'd want my money back, or
Right.
just not consider them a serious practitioner. So yeah, you want to be shook up by the things you read and the things you hear, and be forced to challenge your own ideas, and also to get an insight into serious practitioners' life is always special. It's always a treat.
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the other biggest influences you've had in your magical development besides Oberon Zell, a good friend, and John R. King, uh, uh, a legend I would love to talk to?
Yeah. He's cool. He's really a good guy. I really want to drive that home. You meet him, you know, he's not somebody who comes off as like the super magic guy or something, you know. He just, if you walk into his jewelry store, you'd be like, "Oh, he's a normal guy." If you didn't know him. um he's a really good upstanding fellow. Um oh, Rufus Opus too. Good old Joshua Gadbois, you know, reading his stuff was also a big influence on me. Let's see, in terms of names, that's the you know, the Arbitel has been a major part of my practice and spiritual development. I take those aphorisms very seriously. I've worked with the Arbitel. That was the first grimoire I worked with, actually. Yeah, well, I could talk a bit about my initial magical experiences here, my first attempted evocations. I think that would be a bit of an interesting thing to talk about that has directly to do with the Arbitel and Josh's work. My very first evocation I attempted when I was living in this like weird little back room apartment in upstate New York, right before I'd headed home, and after I had those initial issues with conversion to Judaism, and I was like, I'm going to conjure the Archangel Tzadkiel, and I was working kind of with Aaron Leach's modality where he encourages all this like a huge amount of purification before the work, you know, where it's like you got to do at least a week's long purification for your first time, you know, instead of just the 3 days, which is apparently, you know, at least in his version of things is not good enough. You know, got to do at least a week long thing, 9 day operation, all this stuff. And I prepped a Liber Angelorum so that I could write down the angel names and the seals and all that. Quite a while beforehand, I had my altar made of a box, like a refrigerator box, like a not a refrigerator box, like a mini fridge box. And I made a table of practice on a piece of cardboard, hand painted all by myself. I was going through the purification process to call up this archangel, a highly ambitious project, but that was encouraged by Josh's work, where he's like, "Oh yeah, just call up the archangels of the planets and see what happens. Get your initiations, etc., etc." And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna go for this one. This sounds like something I need some help with right now. Is Jupiter related stuff. And I was working at a taxi company then as a dispatcher from 2 to 11, 2 in the afternoon to 11 at night. And I was like, all right, well, the day of the operation has come. It's Thursday. I got to stay up till the hour of Jupiter in the middle of the night. And a day beforehand, my scrying glass that I'd bought, I made one myself when I was like 12 or 13, but well, I'd lost it by then. I made a new one. I bought a new one from Etsy right beforehand. Um, and it was like it fell off the shelf in my working area and shattered the day before the ritual. And so I was like, all right, well, what else can I do? And I'd read that there's scrying practices where you can use ink and water. So I used that, consecrated the stuff, got everything ready. And I was, those are back in my main Studio Arcanist days where I would just like study everything on there, which is pretty interesting. And there was somebody who's like, oh yeah, you can use these Enochian calls to attune the space and get things to work better. And wow, that kind of added extra juice to the whole thing that might not have been necessary. um, I got started and I had cleansed the area with holy water and done the confession from the greater key and the initial prayers and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to use these calls as prayers to tune the space. And then immediately after that, I heard a big old thing bang in the my living space. which there wasn't anything in there that could have fallen down or anything. I was a little bit like, oh, all right, well, here we go. We're cooking with gas now, and after a while, then I used the conjuration that I'd written down in my Liber Angelorum, and I was sitting there, I was holding my wand and I was in my robe and all this stuff, and then I started seeing this like blue and purple haze and stuff all around the cup. But like I didn't see like anything appear. I didn't see like a man appear or the image of anything human at all. I just saw this light all around it. And then I was like, damn it, this isn't working. So I closed the rite and then I was done. And then I was like, okay, I'm just not ready to do evocation yet. I got to do some more real hardcore practice, I guess. And so come summertime, here I am back home, and I purchased the Stephen Skinner book. Oh, what was it called? The Keys to the Gateways of Magic, I think. That thing that was like the Dr. Rudd book that wasn't the Goetia one. It was the it was where he talks about the angelic keys and the, binding the 4 demon kings and all this stuff. It was really amazing. But he talks about how to tell if an angel is manifesting in front of you while you're doing an operation. And he says that first there will appear in the scry, in the crystal or the glass, that there will be a curtain, a sparkling curtain of all these different colors and stuff. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I was there my first time and I quit the operation instead of going through all the way. Which encouraged me, I was like, okay, now I got some more practice under my belt, of daily devotional stuff and all that. It's like, all right. My second attempt at evocation then, which was my first fully successful one, was conjuring the spirit of Saul from the Arbitel, good old Och, which I did on a Sunday morning at sunrise. I woke up, an hour or so beforehand to do the bathing and to prepare myself beforehand. And I said the short little prayer. The angel showed up in an interesting manner, like in a monastic habit, like a very dark, like a kind of a black monastic habit, as I recall. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I communicated with him. I asked him some questions that had to do with the nature of the Holy Guardian Angel, and I received satisfactory answers. And I got a familiar from him that has been very helpful. And but afterwards, the big thing that stuck out to me at the time, was the after effects of evocation, where I could barely stand afterwards. Here I was having to go to church, and I had a date afterwards, and all this stuff, and I was like, my legs just felt like rubber. I could barely move. I managed to get myself down to the bus station and all that, but I was pretty surprised at that effect. Even reading other people's, accounts and stuff, that's something that doesn't seem to be discussed very often, is that disconnect with reality that can happen sometimes when doing this stuff. Which I had even harder with the Enochian work, that when I was trying to do it without all the tools, and I lost huge chunks of time, and that was kind of awkward. But but the Arbitel has been a big influence on me in my practice, I would say, not just in terms of working with the spirits, but also the aphorisms. Oh, it's very blurry. What does it say? I think you're muted. Oh, that one. Yeah. Yep. There you go. That was the one.
Yeah, I think there's even still copies of this in this edition available from Golden Horde Press. Like this was the one that burned up in the warehouse fire, so there's only like 35 copies in existence, but he still has some of them for sale. So shout out to Golden Horde Press if anyone wants to get the fancy keys to the Gateway of Magic, but you can get it from Amazon as well. It does have, that was a major part of my interest in it. Besides, it's just a really wonderful grimoire with tons of simple breakdowns of the different spirits, but the bits on how to know if they've appeared or not, if they've shown up, is always very interesting. Always very interesting to me, because
I think
there's
it's amazing.
People tend to really get into telling others how to know if they're there or not, and usually those requirements are very narrow parameters that are very subjective. So it's like if it doesn't show up for you the way it shows up for me, then you messed up, which is not the best way to work with it, I think.
Sure. I mean, they're I mean, you do have to have the interaction, is the thing that I would say. But
Yesterday, someone was telling me that if you work the arbitel the wrong way, it'll kill you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And
How could
they
you work
said,
it wrong?
well, you have to see past all the blinds in Christianity. I'm like, it's a Christian text. I'm sorry, it's a faithful, devout Christian text, very Calvinist, but
Obviously.
still Christian, right? This is still right. And they're like,
Yeah.
nope. If you think that it'll kill you, I was like, who told you this? And he said, this is more or less this. And I'm paraphrasing. So if you're listening, dear friend on Instagram, if I misrepresent you, I apologize. But apparently, this was the view of Josephine McCarthy. I was like, that seems very odd because,
Oh yeah,
you know, she's I think she's properly very highly regarded. And I couldn't imagine anyone. But dealing with the issue alone of taking grimoires, completely changing what they are and saying that what they say they are isn't what they actually are, and then that they're actually something totally different. It seems like the most extreme form of eisegesis imaginable. You know what I mean by eisegesis?
pretty much.
Yeah, reading
Yeah.
yourself into the text instead of reading from the text.
Wow.
Right? It's like when you have a conversation with someone and you realize that they assume everything you say is a lie and they're always looking for what you really mean. Those conversations never go well, do they?
No, not
Right?
really.
Like if you don't take someone at their word and at face value, you're the one with the problem, right? If you give someone benefit of the doubt and take them at their word, and then they mess with you, toss them, right? But if you are looking for deception from the get-go and assuming that everything, like, that's a very specific kind of person that exists, and many of them do exist. Unfortunately, this just belief that the real, what people really mean is never what they say and stuff. And that's not my experience of life at all. My experience of life is actually people will definitely tell you what they really mean and what they really think and even what they're like. And you should fucking listen because.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, some people will, hide things and all that, but most of the time, it's not that subtle.
So do you believe that the arbitel can kill you?
No, God, no.
I mean, if you swung it
I've
really
read all
hard.
sorts of interesting things. if you threw it really hard, if you put it into like a potato launcher and had somebody shoot you in the face with it, okay, yeah, then it'll kill you for sure. But
or if you go all name of the rose on the pages. Name of the rose.
Name of the rose. Yeah. Maybe. Probably not though. Yeah, I don't know. There are all sorts of interesting articles that I'd read about the arbitel that were put out in about that same time when Korea, the whole Korea thing with Josephine McCarthy and some other friends of hers, and I was just like, I did not have any sort of remotely similar experience to this. I mean, I've worked with those spirits, off and on. It's not like they're a staple of my regular practice or anything, but it's like, yeah, I'd never had anything weird like that happen. Like, oh, I'm gonna die. I had some close encounters like that with other significantly higher angels, where I literally was losing consciousness during the invocation. That was kind of scary, but I'm here, so it might be a bit crazier than before. But you'd have to ask my wife. So
I think it's definitely worth, one of my favorite things to talk about with the arbitel is the sort of internal struggle it has of Christian theology and pagan influence, shall we say. I'm trying to be general so that I don't misspeak. So, there is that battle of those two influences in it. But again, I think it would be unfair to the text to make any hasty pronouncements as to the intent of the author, who is, of course, still a mystery. Peterson may have figured it out if you can read the introduction to Peterson's Arbitel and see, but yeah.
Yeah. I actually would recommend it as a beginner grimoire. It has some very good instruction, some very good lifestyle advice, especially at the end in the last, I can't remember if it's the 6th or the 7th septenary, but in the aphorisms in one of those last two sections there says that you should cultivate this sense of everything being directed by the spirits. that everything you do, everything you see going on around you is because of the spirits. And that's a crucial aspect, I think, of the magical approach, of magical thinking, which is as derisively referred to in the modern era, quite ignorantly, I would add. Bishop Eller has a whole thing about that too, about how the lack of magical thinking is why so many people are not able to understand a lot of things now. Why there's this kind of, well, kind of a lot of stupidity in the modern world and ignorance is because they won't engage in magical thinking to really contemplate things from different perspectives. But this grimoire, the Arbitel very much encourages magical thinking. Like, oh yeah, it was the spirit of Mercury that caused the library to shut down or something, or oh, this place is flourishing because the spirits of Jupiter are here blessing it. I'm not very good at metaphors, so pardon me for this. But or like if the computer shuts down because Mercury's in retrograde. But yes, anyway, yes.
I excel during Mercury retrogrades, my friend. They're my jam.
Lucky you.
You just got to know how to work with them, man. You just got to flow with them.
True.
But maybe it might also be the result of my astrological chart. I've got some weird stuff with Mercury. But Jason Louv, I watched a video he just did recently on how to find out what magical thinking is and confirmation bias and eradicate it from your life. So that would be quite an interesting debate, pro versus con on magical thinking. Isn't magical thinking really that we're talking about though in the Arbitel, or is it animism?
Both, because it has to do with your perspective. Rather than it just saying this is what's going on, it's like you have to cultivate this perspective of everything around you being shaped by the spirits. It even gives a whole technique as to how to work with spirits just by name. Just take a name either in Latin, Greek, or Hebrew, and kind of like Agrippa talks about. The whole way of generating angel names by the names of objects and stuff, which I was like, oh, I missed that the first time I read this. Now I've seen it. The funny thing is that I hadn't really noticed those last two septenaries until after I'd read Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising. That actually has had a really kind of interesting effect on how I look at things these days, especially seeing Agrippa talk about the power of the mind and the passions and all this stuff in the second of the three books. I was like, wow, I mean, Agrippa was already onto this. Nobody talks about that part, though, typically in traditionalist magical circles. Nobody talks about the mind over matter part. It's like, oh, yes, you just have to pact with the spirits for everything. And that's not just the spirits, and it's like, oh, well, actually, it looks like Agrippa didn't think like that. I don't think the author of the Arbitel would agree with that statement either, but yeah.
Yeah. Man, this is so great. We can go in so many directions with Arbitel. I mean, sure. Everything from its anonymous production to its influence on John Dee and later magic. Like it would have been the most popular grimoire today. Peterson argues, exactly, were it not for the Golden Dawn popularizing Enochian magic, which effaced the popularity of the Arbitel. Are you going to do Dr. Sledge's 3 Books of Occult Philosophy course? He's doing it on Zoom for his patrons. So like anyone can jump on that, just become a patron and go through all 3 books with him over several weeks. And I'll be there. Yeah, I recommend people check out Dr. Sledge's Agrippa. He took a vote for either an Agrippa course or a Hecalot course. Of course, I voted for the latter, but Agrippa won out. So I guess I'll have to dig more. I've been looking for a reason to systematically go through the Purdue translation at long last. I've been using it a lot, but only as a reference. I haven't had time to really go through all 3 books. So yeah, I look forward to Dr. Sledge's course on 3 Books of Occult Philosophy. That's the Esoterica channel on YouTube for folks who might not know who Dr. Justin Sledgehammer Sledge is.
Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize he was doing that. I typically don't really listen to many podcasts. It's like I read a lot, that's my main thing. And, I like being on podcasts. It's pretty fun, but it's been a long time. I used to listen to his stuff more back when I was still in New York. I'd tune into him every once in a while and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. He has his own interesting insights. As a non-practitioner who's just like scholastically into it.
Yeah, the scholarship is really fascinating. You mentioned to me you might actually bite the bullet and do some university degrees at some point. Is that something you're seriously considering, or
I'm
given the
working not
opportunity
specifically in
to?
magic, but not specifically in
Yeah,
magic, but I'm working on a degree through an online university. Thus far, I'm a sophomore. I tested out of most of the freshman credits, so just working on it, bit by bit.
what are you studying?
I'm looking to major in theology. I think I'm gonna do psychology or theology. I'm thinking of doing theology, so that's kind of more up my alley, and I could get the work done a lot quicker. So I have the degree in a couple years rather than 4. Um, but yeah, in the long term, I'd like to do theology. I think I eventually, there's the dream side of it. I would like eventually to try to get a doctorate at some point, at least an honorary doctorate. That's part of the goal with this book that I'm trying to put together. I'm working on this grand project of mine, which is kind of my subsuming interest. This like kind of proving that Gnosticism, and its essential expression is not anti-Christian. It's not against all the weird stuff that people accuse Gnosticism of being. Just isn't Gnosticism in its core. To collate from the canonical gospels and the fathers and the Nag Hammadi scriptures. I mean, it's something I've been working on for a bit, trying to collate quotes and my notes on them and all that stuff. But that's a long term sort of thing. That's like I don't have a bachelor's degree yet, so getting a doctorate tomorrow probably not going to happen. But who knows? I could
Yeah,
get lucky and find the university that'll do that. I've heard of this happening, but it's
well,
kind of a rare
it's
thing.
a you still have to do the work. You still have to do the work.
Exactly.
So, like, if you challenge a master's degree, you still have to sort of done the equivalent of that work academically,
For sure.
which means you have to demonstrate. Anyway, it's not that interesting to me so much the degree system anymore. But what was I thinking?
It's
Lost my train of
mostly
thought.
just
Okay.
because it's like I've done a lot of the work already, and it would be nice to have a little certificate that gives some recognition of that.
Well, the
I
thing
can hang it
that
on the wall
I
and be
think
like,
most
oh look.
people, the thing that people keep forgetting about Gnosticism is that it's Christianity, right? They keep thinking
Hmm.
it's some form of paganism, which I'm not an expert, but as far as I know, it wasn't. Right? It was just
It
not.
depends on it depends on interpretations of the system of aeons and archons and all that stuff. I mean, are Christians pagan because they venerate angels and saints and stuff? I don't think so. I don't think that any responsible theologian would say that. If we're dealing with pre-Protestant Christianity, if we're dealing with Christianity as it was officially speaking, from Christ until the Protestant Reformation or the Great Schism, early Christianity, it's like there just really isn't that big a difference. It's all semantics basically at the end of the day. Um,
Well,
including the
you call it
dualism. I mean, Jesus
semantics. I
is
call it
dualistic.
theology. You know,
Well, there's a semantical side of it. I mean, yeah, there is the theological side of it, but if you break it down to the basic elements, right? It's like are aeons the same thing as angels? Are the same thing as gods? I'm not of the school of thought that angels and gods are the same thing. Personally, I don't
it's what
necessarily think aeons and angels are the exact same thing, but it's all part of that emanationist form of that system of thought, that ontological system of emanationism rather than I can't remember the term for the other thing right now. I can't believe I forgot. Anyway, but
it's all right. It's all right. Well,
it is what it is. Uh, yeah, it's interesting, but it's still like the whole thing is I think that there's a lot more in common with traditional Christian thought and Gnosticism than there is different, really. And I'm more writing it for
I,
the those who are more on the side of traditional Christianity, who are involved in that world. And you have all these people who are like trying to say Gnosticism is like communism and stuff, and it's just like, what in the hell are people even talking about? Like all sorts of weird stuff, which gets into political discussions, which don't really want to get into. But it's just it gets very odd, and it's like I'd like to settle a lot of those questions and to try to prove that Gnosticism isn't the arch heresy that it's portrayed as by many in traditional Christian sectors.
Well, first, I mean, academically speaking, like right away, the first problem you have is there isn't such a thing as Gnosticism, right? So you can't talk
Yes,
about
that is a good
Gnosticism
argument. Yeah.
academically, right? So as soon as someone starts saying Gnosticism academically, they don't know what they're talking about unless they really get specific and narrow their parameters and talk about exactly what they're talking about. And so you have all these different Gnosticisms, and you can't study all of them. You certainly can't really write about all of them at once unless you're doing some magisterial study over like your entire life, I would expect, plus already be an expert. So that would be very hard. I mean, I would say if you're looking to publish something that gets academic recognition, you got to be hyper focused. That's what I had to do to get academically recognized and be able to challenge a few things that I successfully challenged. You know, nice. It was hyper specific, and it demonstrated mastery of academic writing style and research citation methods that I was required to demonstrate. And if you can demonstrate, so it's very much like passing a test rather than producing a work that you consider of value. They're more interested in seeing the value. They're looking for is that you can demonstrate certain forms of higher order thinking, second order, third order thinking. That has nothing to do with the Golden Dawn. You crazy Golden Dawn people. I'm not talking about Golden Dawn orders. I'm talking about second and third order thinking. That's not what people think when they're in the third order.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's a funny crossover in terminology when you use it in the occult world. That's second order thinking. It's like, how is that possible? He's still in the outer order. No, funny.
Yeah,
but yeah, and the reason I would say you should go to university if you want is the same reason I might finish my PhD at some point, or start again, I guess would be the technical way to phrase it these days, is to learn how to think differently, right? You learn how to think differently in undergrad. You learn how to think differently again in grad school, and differently again in doctoral studies. But you can't fake it. You can't, and it's very hard to teach yourself those ways of thinking, because you develop those ways by having people destroy your ideas, poking holes and showing you the flaws in your thoughts. Like, you know, for example, when you're talking about the semantics of these different beings and angels and saints and stuff, are they the same thing? Are they not? Like, you know, as soon as you really put those things together, you fall into the trap that I always fell into in my early days in grad school, with my professors just scribbling everything out and writing loose equivocation. No. Right? Yeah. If you're ask yourself when you're doing your work, is this a loose equivocation? If the answer is maybe, then yeah, you got a ways to go there with that idea. And yeah, so that was something that, and you know, that's something like that would be the main criticism of my master's thesis, for example, would be loose equivocation in certain places, right? So that's a very pedantic critique. Most people would say, like, who cares? What's that even mean? It's like, well, it's a thing. It's a fair critique, right? But most people who would read my master's thesis wouldn't notice that is the most valid critique of it. The ideas are still, of course, sound. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been approved and passed and accepted into doctoral studies. So, like, the core is still foundationally strong, but that would demonstrate that failure of that thesis, that aspect of my thesis that was weak, wouldn't be accepted at doctoral level. Like, if I had tried to submit that for a doctorate instead of a master's, I would have been laughed out of the room. Not literally, but you know what I mean? Like, you're not there yet. You haven't learned that level of thinking. And to be fair, I was only 24 when I wrote my master's. So, you know, my brain hadn't even finished developing.
Fair.
And then a year later, I moved to Ireland and joined an Irish band and started smoking weed. So that didn't do my brain any favors.
Sweet.
But it did my life lots of favors. Yeah. Learning music was the best thing I ever did in my life. And yeah, I wouldn't trade that for any amount of doctor degrees. What else do you do other than magic? Awesome. Do you have any hobbies? You seem like an interesting guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if you have some strange hobby like myconology or something like that.
Mycology, yeah, mycology actually is my hobby. But yeah, it's Yeah, I haven't been
Is it
doing
really?
too much of that lately. I've been pretty, yeah.
Was I right?
I've been too busy with every other thing. But yeah, that's
You're into
hilarious.
psychology.
Pulled that out. Yeah, mycology is, yeah,
There's the psychism at work. There's
yeah.
my
It's fun. I
powerful.
like it.
You're
It's
my
really fun.
you're
I
so your hobby is you're an amateur mycologist. How did I
pretty
possibly
much.
guess that? Well, you know,
Speech
it's a
patterns.
good part
I'm
of the
not
world
sure.
for it.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
live in the right area. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we're actually going to be
And
going
you
out and
got
doing some mushroom hunting coming up here, going looking for morels and all that sort of stuff. So, um, getting more into outdoorsy stuff like, camping and whatever. That's going to be part of my new video series. My new video approach on YouTube for my YouTube channel is going to be Gnostic bushcraft. Going out into the woods, starting a little fire, having some tea, and talking about Gnosticism and, well, other areas of esotericism. But yeah.
I love it.
Can start it on that soon. I make candles, which also ties in directly to my magical and spiritual practice. Beeswax candles, I
I'm
sell
just
them
getting into
too.
candle making.
It's kind of frustrating when it's cold out. It's absolutely horrendous. They cool too fast. They crack everywhere, and it's, ugh, nightmare. But
So
because
the
with
method I
beeswax, I'm not
learned
sure which
for
wax to try
candle.
to work with, but yeah.
So the method I learned in Waldorf school, where I went, um, I still have like almost 100 pounds of beeswax from back then. So that's what I use. I just have to
Whoa.
restrain it and repurify it. And beeswax in Canada, purified organic beeswax is only like $15-$20 a pound. You get a bar, can get it.
No, it's a little
I
bit
think
cheaper
it's the
down
same.
here.
It's about, yeah, maybe it depends, I guess, on the quality or
Yeah,
place as well. But you got to pay for shipping
if you're buying in
anyway.
bulk.
So the way we
Yeah.
did it in Waldorf school was with a wick, and we would have two big tall tins of beeswax on heaters on
Mm.
chairs in a circle. And what we would do in school is we would walk around in a circle. When you get to one of the tins with the beeswax, you would dip your wick in it and pull it out, and it would get a coat. You might dip it in twice, but if you did it too many times, it would reheat the wax already dried on the wick and melt it off.
Mm-hmm.
So then your candle gets smaller instead of larger. And you'd go around the circle, and as you pass by the tins, you would dip your wick in while the teacher read to us from Grimm's fairy tale. And this was a regular occurrence in Waldorf school
Wow.
education.
That's like, whoa.
Yeah. And you'd have another for Christmas fairs or May Day events or other school open houses, you'd do that as well, but the parents and people would join in, and you'd have some of the other teachers on like the recorders, but they would have the small recorder, the medium recorder, the kick-ass huge recorder. I have one of those over there. And they would be playing different old folk songs on the recorder as well. You had the Grimm's fairy tale and the candle dipping. So that's all I know. What I want to get into
that sounds like an initiatory rite of its own.
That's why I described
anyway.
it, because it's just one of those things that looking back on it being like, yeah. Like,
that's really weird. I didn't do that when I was in school.
Like, I'm thinking now, like I was thinking about this just the other day. I'm like, so if instead of recorders and Grimm's fairy tales, you had an invoker and, altar cloths of the right color and the things, and you just, you did your prayers, and every time after you did your prayer, repeated your cycle of prayers, you dip the thing in. Yeah, that would be, it's training for ritual magic in a crazy way.
That's
amazing. But ritual is not just limited to magic, of course, and ritual used to be a part of our cultures and upbringing in all kinds of ways, and it still exists in Waldorf school, unlike other educational institutions. So that's great. Cool. But I want to know more about, like, obviously I don't want to sell candles or anything. I just want to make candles for myself. I can't dip every candle and sit there and wait and then dip it again and wait and dip it again. Like I need 2 new wax candles for my altar candles for tomorrow, right? I've got 2 I could use, or I could make new ones. If I knew how to make new ones, then that would save me from using my backup supply. But I can't just do the hand dipping thing. So I need to find out how else you would make them. And cracking sounds horrible. I need to avoid cracking. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the hardest things.
Do you add herbs in your candles, like actual physical herbs
no.
and stuff to make it smell something?
I just use plain old pure beeswax. Incense is for smelling. Plus the beeswax itself has such a pleasant aroma. I don't want to alter that. I mean, I could theoretically make scented candles if I really wanted to, but I'm not really interested in doing that. Basically, to
Well, I
make
wanted to make
candles, so you
mine.
have them.
I wanted to make mine planetary. I wanted to make my planet. Do planetary ones for
Oh
myself.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
probably the most
that's what I
efficient
was
way to do
thinking.
that would be to get the essential oils in the right from the right plant from like plants
Yeah,
and stuff. Would be
I
just
was
get the
just
essential
wondering. I
oils for
thought
that
maybe
and
you had a
pour it in
cooler way
when
to
it's
do it
melted.
than that.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, I don't. But the best way to make them, if you need them somewhat quickly and not standing over the hot pot of wax for 2 to 3 hours at a time, is to
Well,
get
reading fairy
molds.
tales.
You get
Okay,
while reading fairy
molds.
tales.
Do you have
Yeah,
Do you have any
you get
recommendations
molds.
of good molds?
So most of the candles I use at home are votives, so I just use votive molds. If you're using tapers, they have quite a few online, like on Etsy and stuff. They have like tapers. Church candle molds, I have not really been able to find, but that's a project that we're working on. We're working on making. My wife knows how to make molds and stuff, so yeah, that's a project of ours. It's going to be making church candle molds from church candles we have access to, and then making church candles, like proper altar candles. Um,
Yeah, I'd love to make votive ones.
yeah,
Actually, I didn't even think
self-fitting.
about that.
Yeah, votives are really simple. You can get the stuff on Amazon. Um, the wicks that they sell with the set that they sell they're really thick, so you get like a very sturdy flame, which is awesome because it actually uses all the wax. But you definitely need to not leave them alone. I don't know if you like to leave candles burning afterwards after some ceremonies while you go out and do stuff, but there are some people who say you're
No,
supposed
not
to do
since
that.
burning
But with
down Frater
votives,
BT's temple in '98.
oh dear God,
Or house.
well, that's a way to
Sorry,
learn.
house. It was only the top floor. Plus, it turned out to be a good thing in the end.
Ouch. Okay, well, that's
Um,
how it goes,
have
doesn't
you
it?
have you have you thought about rolling your wicks in the chemicals that make the flame black?
No, I have not thought of doing that. That would be really trippy.
If you do it, if you
That
do
would be
it,
something
send me
fun to
one.
do. Okay. Yeah, that'd be pretty trippy. I wonder. Hmm. Alchemical microcosm of the black sun. Yeah, let's go for it. Oh, yeah.
So what do you want? What's your at your Enokia Con presentation you're doing this July 13th weekend here in Vancouver? What do you want people? What's the most exciting thing for people to know about it, so that they should not only attend and join the cyber conference or come in person and listen to your lecture? What's the reason they shouldn't go out for lunch during your lecture?
You can get to be besties with your angel too. That's like the most trite way to put it, but basically, I'm looking to kind of dispel some of the modern ideas that have popped up about it too. Like some authors some years ago who were insisting on the HGA just being another resistance spirit. Oh, it's just another familiar who will like help you out with communicating with other spirits and that sort of thing. Um, it from the earlier source material that speaks to the nature of this spirit, and as well as my own private experience. This is not something that's just another familiar that helps you out. It's really a profound spiritual guide that takes you through life and helps you in all sorts of ways, spiritually, materially, mentally. It can give you advice as to things to avoid pitfalls. um, but ultimately, the holy guardian angel is the spirit that's there to look after you and to protect you. And this is a part that is often just kind of forgotten about. It's focusing on the HGA as supernatural assistant rather than the peace of God, the supernal emanation of God that's connected straight to the source that you can interact with, that is tailored to you to help you in terms of the spirits you have to interact with and to overcome your personal, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and corporeal challenges. Um, and it's not like it's a spirit that's so hard to get a hold of. If you just follow a certain series of steps, follow some basic protocols, it's a spirit that you can get to be close to and will cement a lifelong fruitful relationship with that particular spirit. Plus the light show when the angel shows up is pretty sweet. So
You had a
I know there are
phenomenal
some
light
people who
show.
try to say that doesn't happen. Oh yeah. Yep.
Do tell.
Yeah, that was part of my experience. Well, so I did this right when I was living in a small apartment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Um, and I had done the prep. My wife had gone out for the day to go and do stuff in another area, so I'd have the whole day to do the work. I started as early as I could in the morning. Got immersed in a freezing cold ritual bath, and I came home and I set everything up. I started burning the incense, anointed myself with the oil, and started with the prayers. And it was, oh, I can't even remember exactly how long it was. It must have been at least 3 hours that I was in the room, had my book to write things down, write down the revelations that I wrote my oath in also. And there's a point where I was basically breaking down during the work because I was like, "Dear God, am I going to fail this?" And it's like, well, I've started. I must keep on pushing through. It was like a micro dark night of the soul sort of thing, and I kept on pushing through. It must have been another hour, so I don't even know. It was a long time, and then boom, it happened. The lights and the sweet odor. There's a special. I think everybody's perception of this will be their own, but there's that sweet odor that hit the room, and this wondrous light show that appeared before me, and I was just like, wow, well, here we go. This is it. I, the angel has arrived, and then I got its name and all that stuff, and yeah, here we are now. It
Here
was
we
it was
are now.
profound. I
Well,
mean, it's really hard to put into words. I mean, it's very hard to put into words the whole thing, but there was the lights. I remember the lights and the odor and there was this profound silence as well, It was it was a whole different thing. It's very different from any other angelic invocation I've done. I'll say that much.
and this was the end of the 6-month Abramelin for Mathers, right?
I did not perform according to the Mathers. I had my patron had given me guidance as to how to perform the rite that was according to my situation, which is also alluded to in the book. That it's not this totally sealed in stone sort of thing. As long as you follow these basic rules, you can get to it yourself. But the guidance I was given was to do it over the period of a month. The previous month was doing the work to get this ceremony itself, involving lots of penitential prayers and stuff like that. Then the next month I was given the ceremony, and I had to go the purification and the form of the rite itself. And then I had a whole year afterwards that I was instructed to be ascetic, basically. No meat, no alcohol, no entheogens at all for the next year after that. And then that was like considered the end of it after that. But I had already at that point been, for the context, had already been in a lifestyle for a couple of years that was like, I was praying 3 times a day, going to ritual baths every morning, sometimes multiple times a day, um, lots of almsgiving, very, very devout ascetic lifestyle. I really think that if you live a devout lifestyle, you'll be able to do it in a much shorter period of time than 6 or 18 months. It's also the other thing that I would mention, which is I kind of talk a bit about in my first book, the one on magic itself. Um, when we're talking about these periods of purification for ritual work, it's like though most of the books that were written about this stuff were written, like 500 years ago, right? I mean, Albemarle is a bit newer. I mean, there are like some manuscripts I think that are from the 1600s, if I recall correctly. It itself claims that it's from the 1300s or whatever, and whatever may or may not be true. But the whole thing is that back then the lifestyle was much slower. Things didn't change like ever. You had very small changes over time. You just had this. You had the cycle of the seasons, and you planted your crops, harvested them, and you set the meat to dry. You had this very steady routine, and you didn't have much stimulus at all. In the wintertime, it's not like you could go inside and watch a movie or get on Facebook and screw around and talk with people and in Timbuktu or whatever. It's like you had your family and you had a fire and you'd have some beer and to tell stories or something, and then go to church on at least on Sunday, if not every day, depending on your station in life. It didn't have that much going on. If you're illiterate, even if you're lucky enough to be literate, it didn't have, every book ever written in the entire history of humanity available on a phone or computer. So it's like the degree of isolation necessary to really accomplish that work, I think, was absolutely needed to be much more than it is now, because everything was so slow and monotonous and took a long time for people's minds to change. Now, try shutting your phone off for a week. Try going off of Facebook for a month. You'll have psychological changes just from that in and of itself. Which I believe are the conducive sides to actually accomplishing the work of getting to know your holy guardian angel. And now I just gave away my whole presentation. So no, I'm just kidding. I got a lot more than that. But
Yeah,
it's
no, I'm sure.
essentially, you get the point, though. It's like I did it that way because that's what I was encouraged to do by my patron, who I was working with at that time. The patron spirit that I was working with said, "This is how you should do it," and I was like, "Okay, here we go. So I'll do it."
Yeah, never hurts to listen to those guys. The other thing about the conference presentations is, due to the private sort of nature of the way it's set up, and they weren't going to be done the way they're being done now, but due to the way venues tend to work, it seems, and because of cancel culture, like doing it as a private group, it bypasses cancel culture. It bypasses
interesting
venues that are only rent to private groups, which is most heritage houses and old venues, and especially once we take this thing to Europe in a few years. And so there's a lot of doorways open up to private groups that aren't there for public events, really. And the distinction between the two kinds of events is very, very minimal in my opinion, but I do get the technical difference. And so it allows us to also present in ways and present information. Like, this is not an academic conference, but allows us to present things that, and talk in ways that we might not even talk on a podcast. And so that's a real strength of that kind of a thing. Yeah. And of course the in-person interaction is great. We'll even have in-person interaction between presenters and the cyber conference attendees, because we'll have live streams going in between the talks. Of course we will.
Sweet.
Right, I'm a younger guy, I guess. Still, maybe, I don't know. According to the boomers,
you're a millennial.
We're all children. I'm a Gen X. I'm Gen X, actually.
You're Gen X. Oh, really?
But I'm glad I look like
what
a
year
millennial.
were you born?
Well, a lady never tells.
We're like at the. Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, millennials are defined in sociology, and I was studying sociology when generational theory changed in 2000, 2001. So back when I first studied generational theory, my whole generation was referred to as Gen Y, but then they had to change that when people change, because sociology is based on observations of people. It's not theories that we impose upon people. Otherwise, it's nonsense. So they changed that because we had Gen Y, and the next generation were called adaptives. So people younger than me when I was studying this stuff were referred to as Gen A, and that meant adaptives, and it meant that these kids grow up with computers. I didn't grow up with computers. That would, count me out.
Yeah.
And so Gen A would grow up with, but then they threw all of that away because they observed what they called this thing defined as the millennial generation. And they defined it by people who went into the world as adults or graduated high school after the year 2000. That's the definition of, that's why they're called millennials, because you graduate after the year 2000. And sociology, you can have a lot of variations and gradations in the enculturation of people, even within the same year, right? So half of my year, sure. I'm definitely the borderline class. But you can't actually say that half of the year of a students, you can't have a high school class where half the students are millennials and half of them are Gen X, because it's sociology, it's culture. So so people like me hung out with people older than us, all X's. People the year after us, they didn't hang out with us. They didn't hang out with people older than us. They hung out with people younger than them. There was a distinct difference between my year and the years after me. And that's where the line is drawn for millennials versus Gen X. But I'm definitely the cusp. Because I'm born 31 days into 81. So a lot of people put 80 as the cutoff, but again, that's an artificial distinction that doesn't actually work in sociology. But what the definition I like looking at the astrological transits to see the differences in the generations, and that's a more useful definer, I think, than a lot of the other categorizations. But one of the phrases I heard for the kind of Xer I am is we're the cusp ones, we're the cusp Xers. So we therefore adapt to technology like millennials, but get angry about it like boomers.
I like that. That's brilliant.
It really does describe people like me. We're like, yeah, I know how this shit works, but fuck it, I hate it. Oh my god, can't we just meet at 7?
Right. Yeah, that's yeah. I'm like the cuspy end of millennial and Gen Z, and that's basically my approach to technology too. It's like, yeah, screw the whole thing, whatever. I'm halfway tempted to delete my Facebook half the time, but it's useful. Comes in handy sometimes. So well.
Yeah, only interesting stuff. So yeah, the conference is gonna be a lot of fun. Today's the last day to get the payment, folks, for where you can pay like $85 a month US instead of paying all $245 at once. Then that's $333 in Canadian. A nice little angelic. Though I think of 333 as a Tesla, more of a nod to Tesla than New Age angel numbers. Anyway, we put the price as low as possible. We need to get 50 signups between in person and online for this event to go forward physically, and let's hopefully succeed and not fail in that endeavor. So if people want to see more physical events happening, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, like throw your weight behind this and sign up to make it actually happen. Even if you can't attend in person this year, like let's get these balls rolling, because otherwise we're going to be in pods and we're going to be more isolated and solipsistic than ever in the future if we don't really bust our asses, I think, to build in-person communities. Embodiment is the kind of theology I've always been a fan of. I'm very much a pantheist, and my theological mentor was Dr. Sally McFaig, she's the foremost theologian of ecological theology. She passed right before COVID in her 80s, and an amazing scholar. You can look out. You like her theology books. Go read Life Abundant or Super Common Natural Christians, or Models of God. One of her big heavy hitting books is Models of God.
Wow.
Metaphorical theology is another one. She's a legendary theologian, hardcore heavyweight. She was the dean of Vanderbilt Theological College, graduate of Yale, and then at one point she left her husband and moved to Vancouver to marry her girlfriend here in the Anglican Church and become an emeritus distinct professor, who I was lucky enough to have as my mentor for all 5-6 years of seminary. So yeah, there's a shout out to the great work of Dr. Sally McFaig, a heavy hitter if ever I met one. She was the first professor I ever had whose brain actually felt like it was beating me up as it was inflicted upon me. Like, I'd had good professors that challenged me and made me think more, but it was like trauma trying to think and learn to think in the different ways she challenged me with. She would lecture a lot on Aristotle and different forms of typology, and that was always very interesting. So yeah, check out Dr. Sally McFaig, her great theology books if you are a ecologically minded Christian. We got Dr. Stephen Stokes from Florida in the house. What does he say? He says, looking good, guys. Keep up the content and stay on purpose. I think we are the only sane ones left. Well,
I'm inclined to agree.
Prescription. We'll take that prescription, doctor. Thank you for the advice. And obviously, DC means he's a doctor of the District of Columbia and recognized by Congress to make such proclamations. I think my knowledge of Americana is accurate. Would you agree?
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
All right. Yeah, no. Awesome. He has a YouTube channel as well. People can check out Dr. Stephen Stokes on YouTube. All right. Before we wrap up, shall we run the promo one more time, brother? Let's do it. This is what you've got to sign up for, people.
It's pretty sweet.
Sign up for this conference so that it can actually happen. It's all the funds are going to making it happen. There's no one profiting off this. It's just get the people there and make it happen. Leave lockdowns behind us and get back to life. The first of 4 Dee and Kelly conferences over the next 4 years support the Arcane Research Society in bringing excellence in academic scholarship and practical knowledge from some of the best scholars and occultists in the field. Featuring in 2024 this summer, Dr. Terry Burns, translator of Dr. John Dee's famous Monas Hieroglyphica. Dr. Burns has just completed a 52-video course on this mystical text, which you can watch on YouTube for free. Join us and experts Rufus Opus, P.D. Newman, J. Allen Moore, Daniel Rekshan, Frater RC, and more for this exciting event which will explore the angelic and spirit-filled world of Elizabethan mages, Dr. John Dee and the alchemist Sir Edward Kelly. Learn the secrets of drawing spirits into crystals, conjuration, and Enochian angel magic, as well as the role of dreams and their connections to these other extra-dimensional realities and alchemical transformation. Sign up today to attend online or in person at enochiacon.com, presented by the Arcane Research Society. All right. Shall we sign off here? Thank you for being on Magic Without Fears, the Hermetic podcast. And everyone listening can, if you can subscribe or like or share this video, that would do us huge favors. Obviously, I'm not seriously beloved by any algorithms that are non-human. So, yeah, do what you can to support us. Sign up if you can. Subscribe, all of that. Go check out Bartimaeus Black's presenter page on the website. Go check it out at enochiacon.com and see what he's presenting and check out his books and all that other good stuff, as well as the other page of our recently added presenter, Ike Baker, who's a very interesting fellow and has an awesome podcast. Justin Sledge was just on his podcast, and you can check out Arcanum podcast on YouTube and all of that good stuff. So thanks for doing this with me, Mr. Black, and we will look forward to seeing you in Vancouver, and we'll have to talk offline about your our other friend, Mr. King, the Lord.
Oh,
John
absolutely.
Is King. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to coming up for this and just having the honor to participate and talk about stuff. It's gonna be fun. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. And it was great to be on your podcast. And hopefully there'll be another time that we could work out.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's do one with Oberon Zell, and maybe even John is King if possible. And that would be fun.
Who knows?
But yeah, no, I was very excited when someone in their 20s applied, because I think events like this need to be there to inspire and excite younger people to keep. I don't consider you a young person, to be honest, but that's we need to encourage and create opportunities so people have reasons to work towards things and study and learn more and produce original material and original insights and help each other. And so I was very excited to have you come on board and hopefully inspire also other younger scholars and occultists and practitioners and all of that. And I'm sorry for thinking you were already a priest, but so you're not a priest, correct?
Oh no, I'm not a priest now. No, someday,
maybe one day,
some years down the line. But yeah, not yet. I am in minor orders. I'm a humble porter. But yeah,
I love it.
I mean, the goal of minor orders in our church is to train you for the priesthood. So yeah, if someday, eventually, with the help of the Lord, I will get there. But still have some training left. Quite a bit of training. Yeah.
All right. Bartimaeus Black, thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Indeed it has. All right. Take care.
Yeah. Cheers, folks.